In the year 21XX, Earth was no longer as it once was. It had become a ravaged, chaotic wasteland. Tearing through black clouds, a menacing ship sliced through the ruined atmosphere. Focusing on the radar, our protagonist spoke over the radio, reporting that he had finally found the target. Moments later, the ship plunged straight down toward the marked location on the map. Below, the scene was bleak, revealing the ruins of a city that had once teemed with life. In desperation, a survivor ran through the rubble, begging for help. Sobbing, the boy screamed at the top of his lungs, asking if anyone was there. Suddenly, a massive, muscular monster lunged down, shattering the ground right in front of him. Terrified, the boy backed away as the grotesque creature prepared to seize him. Worse still, another monster suddenly appeared behind the young man, making him swallow hard and cry out for help. With no escape, the poor youth screamed for anyone who might hear. Clutching a family photo, all he wanted was a tiny chance to survive. Surrounded by the monsters that had ravaged the world, the outcome seemed inevitable. Closing his eyes, the survivor prayed to the heavens for someone to punish these beasts. At that moment, a frenzied beam of light tore through the sky, crushing the creature the instant it struck the ground. Lying on the ground, the boy heard a calm voice apologize for arriving late. Emerging from the smoke, our hero appeared with an imposing presence, and the survivor asked who he was. Jin, with jade-green eyes, remained silent for a long moment. This made the young man suddenly tremble as a choked smile formed on his lips. "Ah yes, finally at last. We can take back our world, right?" Jin replied coldly, "Yes, that's right. So rest peacefully." The young man forced a smile, his eyes hollow, and said, "Thank you very much." "Thank you," and with that, he passed away right in front of Jin. A soft sound echoed shortly thereafter. At this, Jin's expression suddenly darkened, his brows knitting in helplessness. Just then a voice rang out from somewhere, "Jin, you're too late." Upon seeing the person before him, Jin coolly turned his head and then called, "Kagura." Kagura adjusted his glasses slightly and answered, "Perhaps he's the last survivor of this land. Give it up. Jin, you need to face this harsh reality." At Kagura's words, Jin could only lower his face and remain silent. Encouraged, Kagura asserted confidently that humanity had truly been exterminated. They were born from prolonged environmental pollution, those disgusting mutated monsters. And the corrupted ones. They possessed an almost unimaginable regenerative ability. Even nuclear weapons could not wipe them out. However, we never intended to give up and kept conducting experiments on possible subjects. And finally, we found the tool to strike back. But now there's no one left for us to save anymore, right? He watched the last person on Earth vanish, accompanied by a voice that echoed, "We really have come too late." Jin forced himself to rebut, "There is still something worth protecting." Hearing this, Kagura was highly skeptical. "Do you really believe there are survivors out there?" Jin brushed past him like a breeze and replied softly, "Not exactly." With a smile, Jin affirmed decisively, "Rather in the future. The nanomachines you've painstakingly created can also heal the environment, can't they?" Kagura answered, "Yes." Upon hearing that, Jin continued to analyze. That army of nanos not only eradicates the regenerative abilities of the corrupted, but they also trigger the planet's revival process. And then, one day, this planet will reclaim its original beauty, and at that moment, a new civilization will surely arise again, just as humanity once did. After listening to Jin for a while, Kagura found it hard to believe. It sounds like some far-fetched fairy tale. Jin calmly explained, "That would be enough for me. Perhaps even that small spark of hope is more than enough." In Jin's thoughts, the power I hold may become necessary in the future. Believing in that word maybe might, who knows, be the key to saving the future. After staring at Jin lying in the experimental chamber for a while, Kagura turned and left with the thin optimism that remained. If we can just give that chance to future generations, that's enough. At that moment, an echo suddenly rang out. The hibernation system has been activated. 0. While the monsters were wreaking havoc across Earth, the system's sound kept growing louder. 5. 20. 153, 376. 974. 1384, 5180. 8492, 17,987. According to the system's numbers, Earth was gradually restoring its form. Meanwhile, the monsters were increasingly losing vigor. The numbers continued to rise. 32,416, 56,428, 84,524. Thus the sun rose higher. As life began to sprout and birds soared through the vast air, it was the moment the monsters were fatting away. 180, 4,236, 246,578, 306,938, 562,487, 847,527. By these increasing numbers, Earth gradually became verdant again. Cute rabbits, horses calmly grazing, a sight Earth had not seen for a long time. Meanwhile, the numbers kept climbing. 3,842,350, 5,254,690, 7,550,192, 14,250,785, 25,402,437, 45,756,249, 89,524,250. When Earth once again faced the sun and had clear blue beaches and white sand, that was the story of 100 million years later. The system announcement rang out. Access code confirmed, beginning the process to release from hibernation state. The sound of hurried footsteps. Sweat now dotted Hakuma's face. The girl's entire family was fleeing under attack by a red-eyed monster. In the life-or-death situation, Dampo ran behind, crying and helplessly shouting aloud. Could he really be in a place like this? Hakuma affirmed confidently. He certainly is. Shandy interjected helplessly, but if he's not here, we might as well be certain of death. Hearing that, Hakuma spoke up. He is here. As soon as she finished speaking, the girl clutched her necklace tightly. A moment later, Hakuma's eyes widened and with solemnity she said, "The guardian deity is surely present in this place." With that, Hakuma and the others ran straight toward the old temple door ahead. They panic-struckly pushed the door open and went inside. Upon finding there was no way out, Dampo despairingly announced, "Hey look, it's a dead end up ahead." At this, even Hakuma's face went pale. She was too frightened to speak. Meanwhile, the massive, ferocious monster closed in. This made Shandy even more terrified. What do we do now? While her two friends crouched and awaited their fate, Hakuma still had a faint hope and begged, "Please save us." She shouted and tears welled up. "Please save us, O guardian deity." No sooner had Hakuma finished than the experimental chamber shattered, and in an instant a voice rang out. "Request received." Accompanied by a surge of maximal energy that shot straight at the monster, to Hakuma and the others' astonishment, reducing the creature to mush with a single blow. Hakuma and the others were startled by what had happened, while a strange voice from afar kept echoing, "I told you that faith was worthwhile, didn't I?" A figure gradually emerged from the laboratory. It was none other than Jin. He had been in hibernation for 100 million years waiting for his return. With a smile, Jin proclaimed clearly, "Believe in the infinite possibilities of the future." Opening the storage box, Jin said, "The storage unit Kegura made is truly formidable. My outfit remains exactly as it was." Looking at the computer screen, his skepticism was evident. But is this really the world 100 million years hence? Most of the stored data had been severely damaged. It was surprising that this refuge had endured until now. Perhaps it was all thanks to the presence of nanoparticles in the air. The syringe on the table is the device for injecting nanosubstances. Holding the small box, Jin pondered. He really wanted to learn what had happened to the planet, but Kegura had left him only this cubic message. But before we go on. Thinking that, Jin, bare-chested, turned to the Hakama group and asked, "Could you tell me about the current situation?" "Oh, how rude of me. It seems I have been naked for 100 million years." The more he spoke, the more the Hakama group gaped in disbelief. She gently put her gloves back on and then said, "Well, that's better now. You should have a proper appearance, right?" As she finished, Jin donned the exact same clothes from 100 million years ago. The secret chamber door, closed for countless centuries, was finally greeted by sunlight. Jin and his group slowly stepped out. And upon seeing the scene before him, Jin's face turned to stunned amazement. Seeing the lush landscape with rolling mountains and a winding canal, Jin could hardly believe his eyes. So this is the world after 100 million long years. There is no trace left of the era I knew. Seeing him still dazed, Hakama beside him immediately tugged his sleeve and called, "O guardian deity, please go this way, follow closely behind us." With that, the girl pointed toward the group led by Danpo walking ahead. Seeing that, Jin focused his attention immediately. He couldn't help but be skeptical of the people before him. Humans? Impossible. Humanity should have gone extinct in the previous era, right? Could they have evolved to take on human-like forms over that long stretch of time? The more he thought, the more he speculated about Danpo and Shandy's appearances. Koala and cat. While Hakama stared at Jin with a puzzled expression, he remained lost in thought. It was very possible they had been influenced by nanoparticles. The fact they still used the same language from 100 million years ago was the clearest proof. Finishing that thought, Jin smiled and introduced himself. "I haven't properly introduced myself yet. My name is Jin Shido, just call me Jin." "All right," upon hearing this, Hakama replied. "My name is Hakama Phil, you may call me Hakama." Not far off, Danpo and Shandy chimed in without delay. "I'm Danpo, I'm Shandy." After hearing everything, Jin couldn't help but ask, "So then, what do you want me to do?" Pulling him along, Hakama explained, "We're almost there. I hope you can eliminate the invaders out there." This filled Jin with curiosity. Invaders? While the two of them were talking, Shandy's face suddenly went pale. The boy trembled in fear and cried out. When he saw the village engulfed in smoke and flames, both Shandy and Danpo were stunned. "Our village?" No sooner had he spoken than Shandy couldn't contain his emotions and dashed forward shouting, "Father! Mother!" Hakama behind hurriedly restrained him. "Wait, don't run so fast." Under the circumstances, Jin simply stood silently observing everything. It all seemed subject to his speculation. Wooden barricades. And the rows of houses were also built from wood. It seemed civilization had not progressed much. Finishing that thought, Jin followed Hakama's group deeper into the burning village. Upon seeing the scene, Hakama's face turned ashen. In an instant she shouted, "Grandmother!" Her grandmother, who was also the village chief, was confronting a huge monster head-on. Seeing Hakama, she anxiously warned, "Hakama, why have you come back here at this time?" Looking at the monster before him, Jin coldly thought to himself, "Is this the invader everyone was talking about?" It looked no different from a corrupted creature. Do they really call them invaders in this era? The village chief, helpless, urged, "Get out of this area immediately." Hakama paid no heed. She unleashed her power and declared firmly, "I'm not leaving. I'll stay to help you." Seeing the energy flowing through her, Jin was slightly startled and thought, "This reaction. It's time for me to verify." With that thought finished, he quickly charged forward. And with a single strike, Jin easily knocked the monster away. While carrying the village chief, Jin politely requested, "Allow me to intervene a bit." In an instant, Hakama seized the opportunity to rush forward. Seeing her attack the monster with her power, Jin praised enthusiastically, "Great, go on." Hakama gathered strength in her palms, then struck straight at the monster. The power detonated quickly, forcing it to recoil in pain a few steps back. Only when the monster's corpse lay on the ground could he be certain. It really was the regenerative suppression mechanism from the microparticles. The corrupted creature's cells showed no sign of recovery. Did that girl manipulate the nanoparticles in the atmosphere? Normally, only those with a compatible constitution can do that. But, as he considered this, he wondered, can anyone in this era produce that fireball? At his question, the village chief looked slightly dubious. "What do you mean by this era?" "Even so," she answered Jin. "No, only a small number of people can do that. They are those who possess divine power. Including me, there are only 4 such people in this village." This surprised Jin. Divine power. Moments later, he sank into thought. So that's how they refer to the energy that controls nanoparticles. At that moment, Hakama suddenly ran to the village chief and asked with a worried look, "Grandmother, where is everyone in the village?" The chief gently replied, "I've evacuated them all. But more importantly, why did you all come back here?" As she said this, she frowned in despair. "This village is essentially finished. The monster from earlier was actually just a newly hatched juvenile. We are completely powerless against the fully grown ones. Before long, a swarm of juveniles will flood in and wipe this entire village out." No sooner had her lament ended than another voice rang out. "Grandmother, could you stop being so timid for a moment?" Seeing who spoke, the village chief called, "Sarlis." Meanwhile, Sarlis calmly said, "Those invaders are only at that level. I'll tear them all apart." The chief anxiously asked, "Where did you take the villagers?" Sarlis replied, "I personally led them all to the shelter." Hakama walked up calmly and softly called, "Father." Seeing his daughter, Hakama's father smiled and asked curiously, "Hakama, I was frantic when I didn't see you in the shelter. Where on earth did you go?" Hakama answered plainly, "I went to the sealed door." At her reply, the chief was naturally horrified. "Hakama, you're brave. How dare you enter that forbidden place?" Hakama replied, frightened and flustered, "Grandmother once told me that our village's guardian deity sleeps behind that door, and if the village falls into peril, he will surely appear to save us." Hearing this, the chief immediately followed Hakama's gaze and looked at Jin with curiosity. "Is it this person? He doesn't have the bearing of a deity at all." Cutting across her thought, Sarlis suddenly sneered and mocked, "Huh, give me a break. That lowlife species as a guardian deity. Don't make me laugh." Hearing this, Jin frowned in displeasure and retorted, "Lowlife species." Shandy tried to step forward and explain, Sir, this person truly is our guardian deity." The more he heard, the more puzzled Sarlis became. "What? You were wondering where she went. It turns out she went with Hakama." When he finished speaking, Sarlis strode up to Jin and with a contemptuous tone assessed, "Look at his ears. He's just a lowly being with none of the beast tribe features. He must have just been wandering around there by chance and you people mistook him." Seeing Sarlis analyze this, Shandy hurriedly objected, "No, we weren't mistaken. He personally defeated an invader." Sarlis laughed excitedly in response. "You mean that juvenile from earlier? That thing one strike and it's finished." As he said this, he didn't hesitate to point the tip of his blade directly at Jin and coldly threaten, "Listen carefully. This is an internal matter of our village. We don't need a lowly outsider butting in." That's what I mean. Don't interfere with nonsense. No sooner had he finished speaking than Sarlis swept past Jin like a gust of wind. Seeing him leave, Hakuma's father couldn't help but ask, "Wait, Sarlis, where are you going?" Sarlis replied, "Isn't it obvious? I'm going to exterminate that giant monster. And you lot can stay here shaking in your boots," Sarlis said with a tone and face full of contempt, which left the village chief utterly helpless, immediately warning, "You fool, you could save your life if you just ran away now." Under the circumstances, Jin simply remained silent and watched the spectacle. The village chief approached him, speaking sternly. "All right, I don't know who you are, but thank you for helping the children. If you don't mind, please lead these children to the shelter with my son, will you? I must chase after Sarlis to stop him and take one last gamble." Upon hearing this, Hakuma cried out anxiously, "Grandmother." Jin paid no heed to the request and coldly retorted, causing the village chief to hesitate. "I refuse. I have my own pride. I can't just stand by and let him keep calling me a lowlife, so let him go and offer his life himself." With a resolute tone, Jin spoke plainly and walked away, leaving everyone stunned. As dusk fell, the alpha monster appeared outside, massive and armored with hard scales. It advanced forward step by slow step. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared, accompanied by a voice. "Hey, you beast." With a spear in hand, Sarlis unleashed his power and declared confidently, "I am the one who will shoulder this nation's fate, a warrior destined to become a holy knight. Are you only an invader of this level? I'll show you I can fell you without anyone's help." With that, Sarlis, wielding thunderous power, charged directly at the Alpha. This, of course, drew the attention of the smaller creatures. Instantly they braced themselves, and then lunged straight at Sarlis. With a brief stroke of his blade, he easily defeated them, which only boosted his confidence further. Sarlis shouted, "You're in my way. This single slash of mine will end you." Saying that, Sarlis charged straight at the Alpha. He then leapt high and declared, "Take this." In an instant, Sarlis delivered a decisive cut across the large creature's body. Blood quickly flowed out, which only excited Sarlis more. The Alpha howled in pain. Yet very quickly, it regenerated its wound. Under the circumstances, Sarlis was astonished, thinking to himself, "Its wounds are healing on their own." While he was lost in thought, the monster had already advanced and attacked. In a flash, desperate screams rang out. Despite that, Sarlis remained unharmed. He opened his eyes in bewilderment. Jin had appeared with his power and saved Sarlis's life. Jin sneered and asked, "Have you finished performing your little show?" Seeing him, Sarlis stammered, You. Before he could finish, he had to dodge an attack from the small ones. Looking at them, Sarlis wondered, these creatures can still move. At that moment, Jin was subtly moving his hand. And a moment later, he snapped his fingers. And in an instant, the brood were defeated by a single move. Under the circumstances, Sarlis was utterly bewildered. He looked at the small creature fallen on the ground and asked himself, "What is happening?" Just then, a distant voice suddenly called out, "Grandmother, run this way, hurry up." It was Hakuma's group. Upon seeing Sarlis, they panicked and shouted, "Sarlis." However, when those words ended, both the village chief and Hakuma's father were stunned and astonished at the scene unfolding. The chief stood agape, thinking to herself, "What on earth is happening before my eyes? What terrible thing is this? A giant, massive body like that can be stopped with just one hand." At that moment, Jin suddenly said, "It's starting to feel heavier. Everyone step back for now." At his reminder, Sarlis was puzzled. "Huh?" Jin said no more and simply pulled him away. Just as expected, the monster lunged at them. This only left Sarlis even more astonished. After being saved by Jin, he asked, "What the hell are you?" Jin replied calmly, Those creatures can regenerate instantly no matter how much damage you inflict. That's why we must use nanoparticles to seal off their regenerative ability. The more he heard, the more puzzled Sarlis became. What nanoparticles? Jin rose slowly and then explained further. It's what people like you call divine power. Your attack just now wasn't bad. Unfortunately, it was too shallow to trigger the anti-regeneration effect. After hearing this, Sarlis asked with a bewildered expression, "Are you truly the guardian deity of legend?" Jin answered nonchalantly, "I'm no god. However, there is one thing I need to make clear to you. You insisted this was a private matter of the village, right?" Sarlis stammered in agreement. "That's right." "That's why I didn't let him finish speaking," Jin cut in. "You're very wrong. This is actually my problem." At that moment, the monster quickly returned to full vigor and attacked him head-on. Jin, nimble-bodied, easily evaded every strike. Observing carefully, he silently calculated, "First I'll lock down all its movements." As soon as the thought occurred, he flicked his hand and a small tentacle exploded. In moments it spread across the creature. It cried out in intense pain. While Sarlis gaped at the scene, Jin continued, "These abominations are monsters born from our own foolishness. Because of that, someone who survived from the era 100 million years ago, me, must take responsibility and personally end this mess." As he finished speaking, Jin gathered thunderous power in his hands, preparing to strike. This only made Sarlis more incredulous and suspicious. "I don't really understand everything you're saying, but can you actually do it?" Jin replied firmly, "Absolutely. Because I am a product forged by human civilization, carrying a blood-soaked history of long, endless days, filled with brutality and tragic suffering. The last surviving human being, and at that moment, Jin unleashed his tremendous power at the monster, making the surrounding water surge. The monster opened its huge maw wide, then took Jin's blow directly. A horrific scene followed. With a single move, he effortlessly annihilated the monster. The sight naturally left Hakuma's group petrified. Everyone stared in astonishment. Hakuma even broke into a broad, excited smile. Jin's immense power far exceeded ordinary imagination, cutting straight through Earth's atmosphere. After his attack, the creature was finally defeated. Sarlis was terrified, sweat-drenched and unbearably panicked. Meanwhile, Jin remained calm and stated, "Advanced scientific weaponry." After he finished speaking, a faint smile appeared on his lips. Not far from Jin, a rustling sound suddenly arose. A girl hiding in the bushes had witnessed everything and was filled with astonishment. "I came here to investigate a newly appeared invader near the Kodama village. Yet I just saw an unbelievable scene with my own eyes. What was that power just now? Even the captain-turned-knight in the Imperial City might not manage that. This is really serious. I need to return to the capital immediately to report everything to the guildmaster." With that thought, the girl with the magnifying glass smiled excitedly. As night fell, a voice echoed from a corner of the forest. "Can you hear me? Jin, if you are listening to these words, then I may no longer exist in this world." Kagura laughed smugly. "I've always wanted to deliver a classic line like this in a movie. So how does the future world look to you now? The global environment must have improved a lot, right?" "However, there's still one problem," Jin repeated doubtfully. "A problem?" Kagura was blunt. "I'll get straight to the point. Even if the ecosystem recovers, the corrupted creatures will not be completely exterminated." Jin's eyes narrowed slightly. At that moment, Kagura realized, "I've begun to notice something wrong. About a millennium after you entered hibernation, I too had to undergo periodic hibernation to directly observe the world's changes. Thanks to the rebirth of the natural environment, the number of corrupted beings has fallen markedly. When the satellite widened its view onto the red spot, however, it clearly captured a bizarre humanoid figure and a black horse destroying things. That person radiated murderous intent. It quickly detected the screen, and the image turned pitch black. Kagura grew increasingly worried. With changing environmental conditions, evolutionary variants of the corrupted creatures have begun to emerge. I'm not sure which direction they'll mutate, but they'll certainly become an unpredictable menace. All I could do then was prepare the newly born life forms to have at least some ability to withstand those monsters. And at the same time, leave a reserve source of power just for you. Mentioning that, Jin unconsciously reached into his pocket. Power. He held the syringe, unable to hide his skepticism. You mean this thing in front of me? Kagura's voice kept coming. If you activate it, the nanoparticles will automatically guide you how to operate it. Through the process of human enhancement, you are the only individual fully compatible with the nano and able to wield this power. After the injection, the thing in Jin's hand vanished, leaving him somewhat empty. Suddenly, a dagger appeared in the palm of his hand. Jin began to realize. So this is the ability to create materials by reconfiguring the shapes of nanoparticulates. This item is really handy. Kagura added proudly. I've hidden similar upgrade energy sources at secret research facilities scattered across the planet. I didn't keep them in one place to hedge against risk. If they fell into the hands of the corrupted, it would prevent them all being destroyed at once. And because I wanted you personally to go and explore the wide world out there. Kagura said honestly, I can't predict how dangerous the corrupted will become in the distant future. Still, compared to the ravaged world of the past, things must be much better now. Nearby, Agus halted when he heard a strange sound. Is that hurried footfall? The rider turned out to be the brown-haired girl. Thanks to the peace, the town had long since fallen into slumber. Somewhere, candlelight still flickered over people reading. Kagura smiled to reassure Jin. So for now, just enjoy this new world. At that moment the screen glitched and an aged figure remained. I will not be able to be by your side. To witness that with you in person. Jin couldn't hide the astonishment deep in his eyes. Old Kagura left a final message. Everything depends on you, Jin. The box returned to its original shape and Jin fell silent. I understand. At that moment 2 small figures ran over. O guardian deity. Hakama rejoiced at seeing him. So you were here. Danpo, tired, told Jin. Everyone's been frantically looking for you. Both clung to his hands, pleading, please come back quickly. The feast can't start without the guest of honor. Suddenly, Jin stiffened a little. What he had just seen hanging around Hakama's neck. Is this the access key to the research institute? While letting himself be pulled, Jin asked the girl, Hakama, where did you get that pendant? Hakama tentatively touched the key. This one. She answered honestly, my family received it from a great figure long ago. It's a talisman passed down through many generations. They say that if the village falls into danger, this item will guide the guardian deity to protect us. Jin smiled gently at the new information. So that's why she could enter inside. It seems I owe them quite a debt. In the village, a fire was lit and everyone happily gathered together. They all looked up when they heard the hurried voices. This way, hurry up. Everyone shared the same question. Is that person really the guardian deity from the rumors? They looked him over head to toe. Are you kidding me? No matter how you look at him, he's just a lowly nobody. The man kept taunting, unaware that Sarlis was seething. Did that scrawny fellow really defeat that monster? Jin quickly noticed that group. Sarlis immediately swung at the loudmouth. What would you know when you were busy running for your lives? Shandy, flustered, asked the other. Are you all right? I'm truly sorry for the rudeness. Sarlis shouted loudly. Our deity, the Guardian, is truly extraordinary. Hakama, surprised, flipped her attitude 180 degrees. Thankfully, this relieved Dampo, who seemed like a different person from earlier. The village chief cheerfully stepped forward from behind. "So you were here." Jin greeted politely. "Sir, village chief." She carefully sought his opinion. "Allow me, on behalf of the villagers, to say once more that we extend our deepest thanks to you." The man beside her was also deeply grateful. "If you hadn't appeared in time, this entire village would surely have been wiped out. We would very much like to repay this favor." Jin merely gave a small smile. "Don't worry too much about it." The man still wanted to offer thanks, but Jin said plainly, "If you truly wish to repay me, I don't need material goods. What I need now is information. I want to know in detail about the current state of this world." He was stunned for a few seconds by this odd request. The state of the entire world. The village chief suggested to Jin, "If that's the case, you'd best make a trip to the capital." The name sounded relatively unfamiliar to Jin. The capital. The chief explained that it was where the king resided, ruling the kingdom of Kermosia. People from all regions gathered there, so they would certainly have the most up-to-date news about the outside world. "We people of Kodama also often go there to trade our specialty silk from Deepwood." The chief nodded to Jin. "The road ahead is long and fraught with danger, but I believe with the Guardian's ability it won't be a problem." However, for Jin there was one difficulty. "But I don't know the way." She patted the girl beside her and instructed, "Let Hakama accompany you as your guide. She has matters to attend to in the capital anyway." Jin, curious, asked, "Personal business?" The chief did not hide it. "You must have seen it yourself. The Guardian, this child, has the ability to use divine power. In the capital, there is an academy that trains and helps people develop such divine abilities. We had considered giving up because of recent upheavals, but I still hope she can enroll as planned." Jin suddenly realized that schools still existed in this era. Suddenly, another voice interjected, "Wait, everyone hold on a moment." Sarlis confidently volunteered, "I'm the one more worthy to guide the Guardian." The chief looked puzzled. "You have no business in the capital," Sarlis asserted, lifting his chin. "I do. I intend to join the ranks of the Holy Knights in the capital." The chief could only sigh. "You didn't even pass the academy entrance exam, so what makes you think you can get in?" Sarlis, trampled on and then enraged, snapped, "Old woman, what did you just say?" Jin cut in with a question. "Isn't possessing divine power enough to be admitted?" Hakama immediately reminded him, "You also have to take a written exam." Sarlis, being foolish, failed it. Amid the noisy arguments, Jin finally understood. He considered seriously. "A holy knight sounds appealing. I'm starting to feel curious." Elsewhere, Agus had just received the report. A giant invading monster appeared at Kodama village, and it has been destroyed, the girl affirmed confidently. "Absolutely, sir." Still he asked again, "Is everything you say true?" The girl hurriedly confirmed. "I swear it's true, sir. I'm actually on my way back to report this to the guildmaster." The news left Argus in silence. "I thought that, without a holy knight, it couldn't be defeated, so I came on my own without waiting for orders from the guild. I didn't expect someone had already taken care of it." The girl exclaimed happily, unaware of a foot moving close. "In any case, it's truly unexpected to meet a holy knight in such a remote place. What a coincidence. A monster suddenly appeared as if to snatch her." Argus reflexively finished off the monster, to the girl's terror. What had just appeared also made him believe a bit more. "If what you say is true, then this is indeed interesting." A feeling of anticipation rose in Argus. "I'm starting to get excited to meet that person myself." The sun climbed higher, its gentle rays bringing a fresh, peaceful morning to Kodama village. Jin stepped outside and looked at the warm scene before him, exclaiming, "What a fine morning! The air is so fresh and pleasant." In front of him were verdant mountains and birds flying high, making Jin feel he never expected to see such a sight with his own eyes. He raised a hand to shade his eyes and felt a twinge of regret. If only Kaguya could see this with me. Suddenly Shandy came up from behind carrying clothes. "My Lord Guardian." The boy looked at his unclothed form and offered, "Please put these clothes on, sir." The scene had suddenly come to the parting moment to send Jin off from the village. The village chief and several others stood around Hakama. She looked at the girl and advised, "Hakama, remember to fulfill your role as guide well." The girl replied politely, "I understand." Sarlis turned his face away, annoyed, saying, "I used to think I'd learned so much by being near the Guardian." The chief sighed, "First you need to focus on your studies." He snapped back, "Shut up." Seeing this, Jin spoke up to encourage him. "You're Sarlis, right? Your movement techniques yesterday weren't bad at all." Sarlis's face flushed in surprise when he heard Jin say, "I'll wait for you at the royal capital." Hearing that, he burst out, excitedly shouting, "I'll definitely come. I'll study as hard as I can." Despite the shouting behind them, Hakama's father stepped forward to shake Jin's hand and entrusted, "Guardian, please take care of Hakama for me." Then he bent and placed his hand on the girl's small shoulder, saying, "Hakama, just keep yourself healthy." The girl answered, "Yes, sir." Having said their goodbyes, he and Hakama waved. "Well then, I'm off." The two of them, adult and child, set out together. They walked along, following the stream beside them. The sky began to blush pink. Jin stopped at the waterfall ahead to let Hakama drink. They continued on, seeing the sun sink behind the mountain gap while the sky remained rosy in the warm evening light. The girl excitedly pointed forward. Night had fallen. The two sat by the campfire to rest. Jin asked, "How far is the royal capital from here?" Hakama, chewing a bit of cake, replied, "We will have to walk about 4 more days." He expressed some satisfaction. "Closer than I thought." The girl stammered, Guardian." Jin replied, "What is it?" Hakama asked curiously, "Why do you want to learn so much about this world?" He took on a mysterious air and answered, "That's a secret." The girl wondered, "Another secret?" That question left Jin staring off, deep in thought. The corrupted ones had not been wiped out. That was what Kaguya had insisted. He thought back to the past and grew more convinced. It was indeed true. The corrupted still existed in this age. He sank back into those thoughts. Normally they could only multiply in heavily polluted environments. Yet that place. He stared at the blazing fire before him and silently affirmed, something was definitely changing. Seeing Jin so silent, Hakama grew worried and cut into his reverie. "Guardian, your face looks scary right now." He replied, "Sorry, I'm just lost in thought." Jin gazed intently at the girl and thought, at least there are still people living in this era, people not under the control of the corrupted. Hakama tilted her head, puzzled by Jin's calculating look. "First, I need to learn how people today deal with the corrupted. As for the corrupted themselves, I can study them gradually later." Hakama asked, "By the way, what should I call you?" He answered, "Just call me Jin." The girl began, "Lord Jin." He cut her off. "No need for the Lord." The girl obediently responded, "Jin." Suddenly, someone came riding up on horseback from afar. The two heard the sound and reflexively turned to look. The newcomer hurriedly spoke, "Sorry to disturb your rest." He and 2 others on horseback approached and asked, "May I have a few minutes?" The man's face radiated authority as he looked at them. Jin asked in puzzlement, "Who are you?" Argus glanced down at him and introduced himself. "We belong to the Holy Cavalry of the Royal Capital. I am captain of Squad 7, Argus Ulton." He involuntarily said, "Holy Cavalry," and wondered to himself whether this was the person mentioned earlier. Suddenly Karina clenched her teeth, showing irritation. The girl then shouted, "What is with your attitude toward our captain? At least stand up and bow." She then looked at Argus dismounting and affirmed, "What insolence, Captain, it must be them." He cut in, "Come on, Karina." Argus stepped forward to Jin and said, apologetically raising a hand, "Please excuse me speaking from horseback. Would you mind speaking with me for a moment?" Jin stood up, somewhat curious, and asked, "What did she mean by 'it must be them'?" Argus didn't answer that but said, "On behalf of my subordinates, I apologize for the rudeness earlier." Argus then interrogated, "But first I need you to answer a few questions. Where did you two come from, and where are you headed next?" Hakama, still chewing, replied honestly, "We came from Kodama village and are on our way to the royal capital." He doubted and wondered, "From Kodama village?" On hearing that answer, Karina broke into a strange smile. She leaped down from her horse and affirmed again, "I'm certain it was them." Karina gripped her sword tightly, blazing with fervor, and shouted, "There are no birth records listing a lower race in Kodama village. Everything's been exposed. Low-born scum." Hearing that, Jin looked surprised and thought, "So they even have birth records here. This country keeps tight control, doesn't it?" Suddenly Argus cut that momentum with, "No." The girl paused slightly, "Huh." He looked at Hakama and explained, "The outfit that girl is wearing is a specialty of the Kodama region. It's Kodama silk. Even in the capital it's sold at a very high price because it's considered a top-tier garment." With that assessment, Argus became more certain and asserted, "Kodama silk tailored for children is extremely rare on the market, so the girl's claim of being from Kodama village is likely true." Karina was taken aback by this, but suddenly he drew his sword as a signal. However, he pointed the blade directly at Jin and declared, "You are completely different." Argus glanced at Jin's clothing and assessed, "The clothes you're wearing look very strange. What country are they from?" He explained that along the route from Kodama village to the royal capital, there had been a string of robberies by bandit gangs who exploit children to steal goods. Argus's gaze hardened with his hypothesis. "That matches the situation of you two now. They often operate by pretending to be innocents." Hearing this, Hakama panicked and loudly protested, "We didn't do that." He replied coldly, "We'll be the ones to judge that." The girl clenched her teeth, showing worry about the current situation. Determined, Hakama began to activate her divine power. Argus, as if sensing her intent, frowned. He caused glowing swords to appear around Hakama and shouted, "Don't try anything here." The girl frowned and struggled with her current predicament. Argus was somewhat surprised and remarked, "I didn't expect you to possess divine power. You seem quite promising." Jin quietly observed Hakama's form and thought, "So she is indeed a holy cavalry." Seeing the pressure he exerted, Jin also had to admit, "I see, he really is very strong." Argus persisted in that attitude and interrogated, "Answer me now. Where exactly did you come from? It depends on your testimony." Then he threatened he would decide whether to cut off your head right here. Jin remained silent. His face gradually changed color at the unfriendly words. Argus pointed the tip of his sword at Jin and demanded, "Answer me quickly. Where do you actually come from? What you're about to say?" He frowned, staring at him. "Never let your guard down. I'll decide whether you live or die." Despite the threat, Jin was unmoved and remained resolutely silent. His face darkened, his gaze cold as a blade. Argus's aura was no less fierce, his eyes fixed on his opponent with steely determination. Faced with his steadfast resolve, Jin sighed in resignation. "I come from Kodama village." At the sound of that name, Karina behind Argus immediately erupted, "What? That's clearly a lie." Ignoring the girl's skepticism, he accepted the statement, sheathing his sword at his side. "I understand." This left the girl puzzled. "Wait, Captain." Argus asked Hakama, who stood before him, to verify the information. "You're not lying, are you?" The girl affirmed confidently. Jin truly is the guardian deity of our Kodama village. He was a bit startled to hear this, the guardian deity, but he did not continue interrogating. I see. Seeing Argus preparing to leave, Jin was a bit surprised. Are your questions finished? Yes. He leaped onto his horse, sounding apologetic. I still have matters to attend to. Please forgive my rudeness earlier. But Karina still wouldn't let Jin go. She screamed, "Oh, Captain." Ignoring her shouting, Argus asked Jin, "Are you also heading toward the capital?" "Yes." "I see. Then we'll surely cross paths again." He offered a goodwill gesture. "If you run into trouble later, come find me. Consider it an apology for today's incident." Karina shouted again. Argus urged his horse to depart. "Then I won't keep you any longer." The girl was stunned and confused by his action. "What is this? Are you serious?" She called after the captain. "Wait for me." Jin watched the two ride off and could only give an awkward smile. Scene change. Argus's unit was moving toward the capital. Karina kept questioning what had happened. "Why did you choose to retreat?" She kept flailing her arms and berating him. "No matter how you look at it, that lowborn is extremely suspicious." Argus remained silent, lost in thought. "A lowborn, huh?" Then he finally spoke. "I'm wondering who the real weaker party is." Karina was puzzled by Argus's words. "What do you mean?" Rhea, riding beside them, agreed. "That's right." This made the girl even more confused. "Even you think so, Senior Rhea?" She tilted her head slightly at Karina. "Didn't you notice that?" Rhea recalled how powerful the aura around Jin had been. "The enormous gap in strength between us and that man." Argus continued, his face grave. "I tried to strike him 2 or 3 times to test, but—" He remembered pointing his sword at Jin. And the sword in Argus's hand couldn't move at all. Jin, meanwhile, casually shoved his hands into his pockets. Used his power to stop the blade. "The outcome of that fight was decided before it began. He countered before I could move." Rhea looked at Argus with concern. "Captain, did you use divine power?" "Yes." His admission startled Karina. "I couldn't even activate mine." I had planned to use the same stratagem as before with Hakama, to borrow comparable strength, but the spirits refused to lend me their power. Rhea also had to admit, I was in the same situation. Only then did Karina belatedly realize what that meant. Argus added, "It also means there's an enormous gap in divine power between the sides, to perform a feat like that." His expression darkened as he grasped the seriousness of the matter. Even among this entire cavalry, perhaps only the Grand Commander could match him. Karina and Rhea both flinched at that statement. The girl bit her lip. "I blame myself for not sensing anything." Argus sympathized with her, simply because that person is an abnormal existence, and you just recently joined the unit. People buzzed with speculation. So the one who killed the invading monster, was that the man? Most likely. Karina remained uneasy. "Are we really going to let them leave so easily? Isn't that too dangerous?" Argus, helpless, said. "I don't know their identity, but they don't seem hostile. For now, let's observe them quietly." Putting that aside, he turned and reminded everyone, "Now let's head back to the capital. We finished dealing with the invading monster sooner than expected, but we can't be absent any longer. I'll hand the bandit matter over to the guild to handle." "Understood, sir." Rhea turned to admonish Karina after today's incident. "You should focus on cultivating your character rather than only worrying about strength." Argus rode ahead, lost in thought, the guardian deity of Kodama village. While he pondered, his troops had somehow neared the capital. If that person became our ally. Argus wanted to seize the opportunity. They could be the key to unraveling the kingdom's most intractable problems. Scene change. Jin and Hakama were also marching toward the capital. He sighed. Yesterday was quite an interesting encounter. He wondered, do all knights in the capital possess formidable power like them? The girl denied it. No, they are exceptional cases. Hakama could immediately recognize those people, holy knights. They are an elite group carefully selected from the best of the cavalry, and those two ranked among the top. In that elite regiment, she kept praising their power and the speed of their spirit summons. No, their spirit magic is on an entirely different level. Jin was a bit confused. Spirit magic. Hakama explained. It's the art of summoning spirits from the elements and borrowing power from them. He nodded. I see. They call the nanoparticles spirits. As he walked, he thought, in this era, science seems almost like fantasy. Suddenly Jin remembered Karina angrily pointing her sword at him and shouting, "You lowborn trash." He sighed, and the whole lowborn race thing. This helped him deduce. It seems countless different races exist in this era, right? Yes. Hakama described some common races. Some look exactly like fish, others have insect-like forms. Jin was surprised. Insect-like. She further explained the reason for this. My grandmother said it's because habitats have been shrinking for a very long time. That caused the race's appearances to diverge, their bodies gradually transforming to adapt to where they live. Jin was astonished by this new information. Evolution driven by environmental influence. He fell into his own thoughts. So that means there were survivors from 100 million years ago, and humans back then evolved into these forms. Thinking about it more wouldn't solve anything. Jin finally understood why he was looked down upon. So those who didn't evolve are called lowborn. Yes, Hakama knew this world well. That's why society despises the lowborn, those who fail to adapt to the environment, because they're considered backward. The girl added more about this world. Most people sold into slavery also belong to the lowborn races. Jin gritted his teeth at hearing this, so slavery still exists here. Hakama was also furious about this discrimination, but in reality there's no such big difference. They're just a bit different from the majority, yet they're treated so badly. She was extremely angry. It's completely wrong. Jin smiled approvingly at her. You're a good child. Suddenly, a man with a cane stepped out to block their path. His voice was hoarse and exhausted as he begged for help. Help me. Then he collapsed. Hakama hurriedly asked, Are you all right? She quickly ran over to him. Those ears. Jin also slowly leaned in to observe. He lay face down on the ground, gasping for breath, breathing heavily, his body covered in wounds and bruises. His ears were completely human, with no alterations at all. Those ears were strange. He lay on the ground, filthy and gasping for breath. Jin stood there, hand on his chin, observing and thinking, bruises all over. These injuries are really severe. Hakama sat beside him and slowly helped him to a sitting position. Are you all right? Jin reached out a hand, using his power. Hold on a little. Let me heal your wounds right now. Suddenly something flashed in his eyes. He sat still and watched as the boy spoke. Don't move, not at all. One of the boy's hands held a knife. The other gripped the girl's throat as a threat. If you so much as twitch, I'll kill this girl immediately. The three of them were forced into this terrifying standoff. Jin calmly looked down and thought, I see how it is. He looked at the boy, teeth clenched, knife aimed at Hakama. We've carelessly walked into your trap. His gaze flicked elsewhere as he thought. That means those others must be nearby. In the distance, a shadowy man stepped forward. So there really was someone capable of coordinating with her. The man appeared with a long beard. You did well, Poweru. Another man appeared with his subordinates behind him. You followed orders with perfect precision. In Jin's head the thought arose. That was camouflage invisibility tech. An image of a shadowed figure with arrows pointing to it formed in his mind. It works by capturing images of the surrounding environment and using ultrafine nanoparticles to render the user invisible. He stood calmly before them, thinking. The only weakness is that movement reveals the camouflage, but they operated it with extreme skill. The other man still had his sword pressed to Jin's face. A low-born creature like you dressed pretty sharp, aren't you? Which country are you from? The sword pressed closer to Jin's neck. Stay calm, don't be stupid and move. Hakama tried to break free and shouted. Lord Jin, the man taunted, you know what'll happen if you try anything right. On the other side, the girl was clutching her stomach with her power. He shouted loudly, Hakama. Only then did the girl calm herself. Then Jin spoke. That kind of power isn't meant to be used on people. You realize that, don't you? The girl hurriedly screamed in panic, but the man still pointed his sword at him but turned his head. We've hit the jackpot, boss. I can't believe that girl actually has divine power. A teammate standing nearby. You can use it too, right? He turned and replied, Who knows? The man answered angrily, What did you say? Then he kicked Jin in the stomach. He doubled over with a cry of pain. Lord Jin, the man's boot remained on him. Don't get cocky, you inferior creature. The man in front warned him, careful not to damage the valuable merchandise. He closed his eyes and grimaced, replying, After all, a lowborn won't fetch much money. He continued speaking, But what if they have divine power? There's no way a bunch of lowly people should possess that kind of power. Hakama thought, These guys. The girl's face was full of fear. She thought it must be the bandits the Holy Knight had mentioned. Those miserable people. The man slowly stepped toward the girl with a surge of power in his hand. All right, take a short nap. The girl thought to herself, if we stay captured like this. The powerful hand came close to Hakama's face, making her flinch in fear. Both of them will be sold off as slaves. A dark atmosphere drifted slowly by. Jin was right in front of her calling, Hakama, wake up, hey Hakama. She answered slowly, Lord Jin. Then the girl fearfully sat bolt upright. His muscular form sat beside her. Are you hurt anywhere? She turned to him. I'm fine, more importantly. It turned out they were in iron cages, and there were many victims outside. Where exactly have they locked us up? Then Jin turned his face away. This is the den of those who attacked us. Looking at the victims in those iron cages, it seems the other captives were all confined here together. The bodies of some inside were little more than skin and bones. A pitiable blue-haired girl hugged her frail body. The two of them sat there full of anxiety. Hakama looked at him. Why are you naked like that? Jin bowed his head and grimaced. They stripped me of my clothes. They found the outfit too strange. At least they left me my underwear. The girl sat there dumbfounded and replied, You don't seem bothered by it at all, do you? He looked away. Anyway, most of my previous life I spent bare-chested. The girl's innocent face said, Putting that aside, why didn't you fight back then? With your strength you could have easily taken them down, Lord Jin. On the other side, the soldier who had opened the door entered with the boy from the ground. Hurry up and finish this. The two of them turned to look at his filthy figure beside the 2 loaves of bread. So you were awake all along. Hakama stood up, gripping the bars and shouting. He sat down and handed the bread to the girl. I don't care if you hate me. Then he casually stood and looked down, because I never dared to expect forgiveness in the first place. Hakama could only grit her teeth and cling to the bars. Jin spoke to get his attention, truly too merciful. He looked down in panic. Merciful, he countered, a true villain. Sitting there and gazing at the sky with longing will never waste time worrying about being hated or forgiven, or something like that. Then he slowly stood up, drawing their attention. Okay, let's begin. Jin grabbed hold of the bars of the cage. This frightened him. He stood at the cage he had easily broken open, to the boy's astonishment. Hakama stood behind and dusted her hands off. I've been patiently waiting for you. No one here can eavesdrop on our conversation. He replied, waiting for me. His face turned terrified when he heard Jin. Jin, where is the person most important to you being held right now? He bent over cautiously. How did you know that? He slowly stepped forward with his hand full of power. It was just my guess. He fell silent before the power in front of him. From the start, she even fooled me. Those bruises on her body are completely real. He only then looked, surprised, at the bruises when Jin mentioned them. However, even villains wouldn't brutally beat their own comrades like this just to exploit them. That's why I saw through it early on. He was amazed by Jin's insight. I realized she was being coerced by them with force to comply with their demands. Then his hands clasped together, trembling in fear. And he slowly spoke. My younger brother, he's been taken by them. He recalled the painful moment they were torn apart, and my parents. He shouted bitterly. They were both brutally murdered by those bastards. He clutched his shirt with both hands as tears fell. So I had to protect my brother's life at any cost. Hakama stood behind, watching him clench his fists as he spoke. That's the only reason I did it. A terrifying expression crossed Jin's face when he heard of their crimes. What filth! The girl beside him looked up. So did you intentionally let the bandits capture them to rescue them? He replied. That was part of the plan. But he said aloud, evil people are stubborn and tenacious. They're like stubborn grease stains. Another voice asked, grease stains? The soldier at the door said, if even one escapes, they'll breed again and cause more disasters. Those words rang out, making the man look over in surprise. Therefore, if we've decided to eliminate them. Immediately after, Jin sprang up from behind and kicked hard, sending both the door and the man flying. He grabbed the frame of the door he had just shattered. His hand clenched there, his face terrifying. We must root them out with no trace left, sweep them away utterly and brutally. When it comes to filth, I know them better than anyone. 100 million years earlier, in a bustling infrastructure city, young Jin appeared, filthy and unkempt. He watched the news coverage of a case that successfully captured a drug kingpin. As for me, I've always longed to enact justice. A car stopped behind where he was standing on the street, and a foot appeared right behind Jin, but I soon realized one thing. He glanced casually, a world still in need of justice. 3 violent thugs stood there, truly scum among humans, and they were multiplying everywhere. The leader, with a cigarette in his mouth, hoisted Jin up. If I could live a normal life, that would be the ideal. But at that moment, his face was calm. The circumstances I grew up in wouldn't allow that to happen. He was still in the man's grip, so. Not long after, Jin lifted one hand and bent the man's arm to the side. I crushed them. Then he stomped straight on the man's stomach, kicking without mercy. To this day he grew up stern and destructive toward them. He nonchalantly sat atop the pile of bodies he had slain. I kept sweeping them away. Suddenly, someone stood before him sitting on that mountain of bodies, and then one day someone told me that. This made him flinch and frown. Kagura reached out as if to grasp him. You were born in the wrong world. Back in the present, Jin was dragging someone, crawling across the ground. The 2 soldiers gritted their teeth, backing away and stammering, "Stop right now." Many more soldiers were lying sprawled on the ground. What exactly do you want? He kept asking as more of his comrades fell to the ground. How did you get in here? Jin smiled menacingly. Then he hurled a man flying straight at them. The man stood there, stunned, catching him in disbelief. Jin then lunged forward with agility and struck. But the man could only stand there in fear as Jin's punch smashed into his face, while a voice called from behind. You bastard, who the hell are you? He crouched on the floor, cradling his comrade in panic. On the other side, those locked in the iron cages had been released. Poweru looked visibly worried. That shout was. She hurriedly and fearfully asked, what kind of being is your companion, a god? Hakama turned calmly and answered, "He's a guardian deity. Yes, a god." The girl looked up confidently and said, "Leave it to Lord Jin. He'll handle it." She turned to them as they prepared to leave. "For now, do as Jin says. Get everyone out of here." She worried inwardly, can we really escape? She gritted her teeth in hatred thinking of him. But that man possesses an enormous reserve of holy power. There's no way he could be defeated by mere muscle alone. At that moment the man was sitting on the ground in panic. "Wait." Jin grabbed another man's head in front of him. "What are you pleading for? Money, right?" The man laughed nervously. "Ah, no." He pointed at the boy sitting in the cage. "Or do you want slaves?" Seeing that boy pitiful like Jin as a child, he said, "If so, I'll give you as many as you like." Jin glanced over without saying a word, then shoved him to the floor, spraying red syrup. "Have you emptied out everything you wanted?" The man sat there sweating, thinking, what the hell is happening? He looked at Jin in terror, thinking, why is my holy dark magic useless? Jin stepped closer to him in a terrifying manner. The man bit his lip, thinking, what kind of demonic power does he wield? As Jin drew near, he said, "You're only a half-hearted villain." The man kept listening to what he said. True heavyweights would run away immediately. Jin frowned and looked down. "And people like you initially always sneer at opponents and are convinced they'll definitely win." The next words set him off. "Then the moment you taste defeat, you start begging pitifully." He thought to himself, damn it. Then the man bolted. "If that's the case, I have no other choice." He slapped the switch down and shouted, "Not yet, it's not over yet." But he grinned evilly as the door slammed shut. A monster appeared behind the door. Jin stood there stunned, while the man remained arrogant. "I obtained this specially at someone's request." The huge, terrifying monster stomped forward. "If sweet words don't work, then so be it." He flashed a wide grin. "I will make you." The monster before Jin opened its maw and roared out purple power along with his words, "Become pathetic and shattered." Then it reached one massive arm out. Jin glanced up cautiously, crossing his arms over his head as it prepared to strike. The man froze in surprise. Huh. It turned out the monster's punch had been gently stopped by his two arms. "You see, I was born with an extraordinary body." His hands supporting it as he glanced over. "Compared to ordinary people, it seems I have more muscle fibers than him." Then Jin pushed it straight up. "Well." He leaped with green power coiling around his arms. "I will show no mercy to a corrupted one." As he thrust his hand out, a streak of bright green power burst forth. "And I will also use holy power." Immediately the monster bled all over the floor, terrifying the man to the core. Then Jin stood before him, thinking he can also use holy power. Then he said, "So." His face calm, he asked, "So what are you going to do next?" The man's face was drenched in sweat, speechless. He clasped his hands together, trembling. "Can you please turn a blind eye and spare me this time?" Before Jin could do anything, he landed a crooked punch on the man. "I can't." Jin put his coat back on. "All right." He turned his back and walked away, leaving the punched man sitting there thinking, "Finally found my clothes again." Then he looked toward the iron cage with 4 kids inside. "Sorry, but please wait a little longer." Jin's words made the 4 children seem to see light again. "I'll get everyone out of here soon." He stood at the desk and picked up some files. "But first I have a few things to investigate. It won't help if I can't collect evidence of their crimes." He opened a drawer and found stacks of papers. Oh. Sitting at the desk holding a sheet, he thought, "This looks extremely suspicious." Strange lines of writing appeared on the paper. Jin smiled, "I see." But immediately his head filled with question marks as he read. "What are these lines about? I don't understand a single word." He stood looking at the man collapsed on the floor. I'll have to ask Hakama to teach me how to read the language of this era. Then he sat and touched the fluids from the monster. Still, what do they plan to do after capturing the corrupted ones? Power currents appeared when he touched them. It's time to uncover the truth. Electronic screens ran around him. I'll access the cameras from the nanomachines drifting here. Jin sat there looking down, thinking. Any footage from the past week should still be stored here. His gaze lifted, full of menace. Recalling back then in the monster's enclosure, the man stood behind him. "But sir, how do you intend to deal with such a large net?" he replied. "That's none of your concern." He gave a menacing smile. "However, I think I'll tell you one thing." He glanced up, radiating danger. "Very soon, there will be a most intriguing event unfolding in this country." At that moment, Jin stood before the screen, frowning. The next day, in an old-fashioned village, the people who had been released were standing here in formation. Hakama and Poweru were also standing there, watching. Suddenly she gasped, having seen something. Nino ran over from Jin's side when she called, "Nino, sis." The two sisters rushed into each other's arms, sobbing. They hugged tightly as tears streamed down Poweru's face. "Thank goodness, thank the heavens." She grabbed her sister's hand, looked up at him. "Sir, we truly thank you so much," he replied to them. "I'm no deity, but don't worry about that." Jin glanced to the side. "By the way, let me ask." Looking toward the people marching in control. "Are the ones rounding up those bandits subordinates of the local lord?" Hakama replied beside him. "No, they're from the guild. I summoned them." They discussed Padoraku. "The man standing over there is the guild master of this town," he asked. "Is that so?" He turned his face that way. Then stepped up to the two of them. "Were you the one who handled this matter?" Jin answered. "Yes." Padoraku raised his hand and bowed with his men. "My name is Padoraku, guildmaster of the association. I offer you my deepest thanks for your assistance." Then he glanced upward. He stood there, making him think. To face that many enemies without a scratch, he looks like a low-level species at first glance, but my instincts tell me. Thoughts formed in his head. This boy cannot be ordinary. Then he spoke. "We've recently received many reports of damages related to this string of incidents. The association has faced numerous requests to eliminate this bandit group." Jin replied, "So the local lord isn't the one sending troops to catch them?" Padoraku placed his hand on his hip. "You must be joking. A lord doesn't have that level of authority." An image of him kneeling before his superiors came to mind with the narration. The only ones authorized to handle crimes like this are members of the association, those who have sworn loyalty to the king. He reached out and added, "Even if the regional lord, Lord Sappi, were committing crimes, we would still be obligated to report such behavior to the king, although such a thing never happens." Jin stroked his chin in thought. If explained in terms from 100 million years ago, a lord is like a mayor, and the association is akin to the police. His mind swirled with unnerving thoughts about the man, but Shappian. He then produced a scroll for him. "This is a document I recovered from those people. Might it be of use to you?" Padoraku opened it and was stunned. This is a list of those who made covert deals with the bandits." He continued reading. "With this in hand, we can round them all up in one sweep." He asked, "Is the name of the local lord on it?" Jin frowned at the answer. "Don't take my earlier joke seriously, of course not." He also thought to himself, "I see, I must truly be a formidable villain." He looked toward Poweru, puzzled, thinking, "There's nothing more I can do right now. More importantly." Jin placed his hand on Poweru's younger sibling's head, then turned to him. "What will happen to those freed slaves? What will their future be like?" Padoraku answered. "For those with search requests or whose identities have been verified, the association will take responsibility for returning them home." The two children bowed their heads sadly at his reply. But for those who don't fall into either category, we truly cannot help them. He stood there thinking. If I recall correctly, these two children lost both their parents. He asked, "Isn't there any care facility here?" Padoraku looked to the side. "None at all. We can only act as intermediaries to help them find work." But looking at those poor children, because these two belong to a low-class race, I'm afraid finding jobs for them will be extremely difficult. Jin lowered his head and sighed, thinking, I really want to help them, but... The two children could only look at each other, and he followed their gaze, thinking, if nowhere will hire them, it'll be hard to find work. Suddenly Jin realized something. No, wait a moment. Then he said to the two children, if there's a place where both of you could work, would you be willing to go? Powaru quickly replied, yes, sir. Do you already have a place in mind? Jin smiled, yes. He remembered Argus saying, if you ever run into trouble later, come find me. Jin's face looked a little ominous. There's a place that's perfect for the two of you. The next day, at Argus's mansion in the capital of the Kermosia kingdom. Argus's eyes were wide with alarm. Rhea rode behind him. What's wrong? He, seated on the lead horse, said, nothing, it's just that I suddenly felt a chill down my spine. Then he dismounted from his horse. Argus stood beside the horse and looked back. This is far enough. He stood before his troops. The long expedition has ended. Thank you all, rest well today. After that, he entered the building. All the maids bowed in unison. Welcome back, Master Argus. He turned to the steward and asked, any new reports? The steward looked at the maid standing there, visibly worried. Argus closed his eyes and asked, has something happened? The steward standing next to him bowed his head. I'm truly sorry to trouble you when you're tired. But he then looked up. Please don't worry about that. He seemed anxious and looked away. A girl on the upper level watched the two of them walk together. It was Milia, arms folded, observing. Argus waved his hand. I understand, thank you for the report. He bowed, it's nothing. Then he put his hand to his head and sighed. The situation seems worse than I thought. He recalled, the monster harming the city's residents. An invader appeared right in the capital. How did it get in here? Argus frowned ominously. No, someone must have deliberately released it. He remembered the campus grounds of a certain building. The most suspicious thing was how they strictly forbade anyone not on duty from entering Harnack's academy. In any case, the moment Jin, walking with the three children, appeared, I need to quickly find allies. 3 days have passed since the campaign to quell the bandits. Jin was walking along the road with Powaru, her younger brother, and Hakama. She grimaced at him. Are you sure there's really a suitable job for someone like me in the capital? He glanced over. Don't worry too much. Jin still looked down at her. You already know how to read and write. Powaru even has a very good head for numbers. You'll surely find a position. He continued, trust in your own abilities. Those words made her light up and look back. Yes, sir. Suddenly a voice called, Jin, look. Hakama pointed toward a distant castle. We've arrived. Jin's face was full of surprise as he saw it. The four of them gazing down at the magnificent kingdom from above. Is this the capital of that nation? Here the sky seemed bathed in pink. The four were astonished at the view, especially Powaru. This place looks bustling and lively. Hakama pointed to a stall across the way. The capital relies heavily on imported goods, so products from all regions pour in here. Items sprang to the girl's mind. Villagers from Kodama often travel here to sell their specialties. Jin looked at her. I've heard that before. He glanced at the odd people nearby. I see, what an interesting place. An insect tribe. He looked at 2 other types of people. So many races and civilizations converge here. It's only natural that unique developments would arise. Then he looked toward a stall. These goods are imported directly from the neighboring country. The city was kept immaculately clean. Jin looked at the children and noted that the security system also seemed well maintained. Suddenly he glanced at something, yet. Across the way, a well-dressed man stood before a group of homeless people. He frowned and thought, perhaps every era has its own problems. Millia had been standing behind him for some time, and he asked Hakama as he looked down, "When do you enroll?" The girl looked up and answered, "Next week." She watched them walk as he said, "So we still have a little time to prepare," she replied. "Enrollment takes place right after the exams end." She thought to herself, "I want to enroll in Harnick's academy." She held a folding fan over her mouth and glanced at such a boy, and at a man of a low-class race as well. That evening, a girl stood before a house brightly lit with lanterns. Inside the room, Poweru's younger brother and Hakama happily jumped on the bed together. Jin also sat on the bed. "At last we've found a decent place to lay our heads," the girl beside him answered. "Yes, that's right." He stood there, hand to his mouth, thinking, now the group has finally reached their destination, the kingdom's capital. What should my next move be? He held a bag of gold and thought, in any case, I still need money to survive in this era. Hakama stepped forward and set the pouch on his head, prompting his thoughts. Although we received a reward for defeating the bandits, that money won't last forever. My father said I must share part of it with the freed slaves. At that moment, an image of a tired Poweru caring for her sibling surfaced. On top of that, there's the issue of finding stable jobs for these two kids. He recalled Argus and thought, meeting that young man would be the quickest solution, but without an introduction, it would be hard to see him immediately. Jin put his hand to his chin and glanced around. Then he rose from the bed. Perhaps first I should conduct a thorough investigation into the corrupted figures of this era. He recalled the thugs from before, especially knowing there were people plotting to exploit them for dark purposes. Jin stood by the window with thoughts in his head. The corrupted are an extremely terrible threat. We must never let them run free. He glanced down at the bustling scene below. I will never allow that horrific era to repeat itself. Suddenly he turned to ask Hakama, what do people in this country usually do when they want to investigate or study something? The girl propped her chin on her hand lying on the bed. They find someone to ask, find a teacher, or look up books. Then she flopped onto the bed. However, books here are very expensive. In Kodama village we had to share a few scarce books. They were hard to come by. Hakama looked up. But the capital has a large library. You can go there to look up information. Jin brought a hand to his mouth. There's a library here. He looked up thinking, that's convenient. I'll make full use of it. Maybe I'll even find clues about the research facility Kagura left behind. A pink-haired girl sitting nearby said cheerfully, I'm very sorry, but you are not allowed to use the facilities here. The four of them were surprised when they heard her. Because books are considered state property, we can't allow just anyone to enter freely. She continued, access is limited to students whose abilities are recognized by the academy, instructors, and nobles residing in the capital. Jin sighed, I see. Hakama stood beside him nonchalantly, and you couldn't even read at first. Jin suddenly realized, all right, I still can't read well yet. He remembered when Hakama and Poweru taught him in the forest. People had been teaching him recently, but he'd need more time to become proficient. He covered his face, grimaced, sighed, and thought, what should I do now? Behind them, two hooded people were talking. Is it them? The other reached out. That low-class specimen accompanying the kids is them. A voice then called, making him turn. Got a moment. As he turned, a fist came flying toward him. But Jin gently caught the punch. His face grew more terrifying. A moment, your way of greeting is special. The man still wore a bright smile. I thought security here was supposed to be good. A golden light emitted from the two men's grip. Then Jin released his hold, and the man's hand shot up as the golden light flashed. They flew into the air, surprising everyone. But he still smiled and reached out. You're so wrong, your instincts are sharp too, friend. Poweroo's younger brother clung to her, and she thought in fear. How dare they use divine power right in the city's center? Jin stood and asked, "Can you tell me what your purpose is?" The man raised his hand and answered, "Someone hired us, your kind is an eyesore." Thoughts filled his gaze, so someone hired them to come here. He put his hand to his chin and thought, "Perfect, this actually works out well for me." The two men laughed with satisfaction. "If you disappear from the capital right now, you won't have to worry about being threatened every day, understand?" he replied. "If things truly become dangerous, I'll consider it." The man ignored him and threw another punch. "Is that so?" But Jin caught and twisted the man's wrist. The man's face went blank and drained of color. Then he casually pinned him down, sending him flat to the ground. He looked as if his head might fall off from the damage. The other man's hand was gripped by a golden force. "You bastard!" He spat fire from behind Jin, and Jin seemed to be engulfed by the flames. This delighted him. But before he could enjoy it long, Jin stepped out of the smoke and reached for him. With one hand, Jin grabbed the collar of his shirt. He gently lifted him with one hand as the man's body trembled. "If you really want to threaten me properly, come back when you're stronger." He prepared to throw a punch, but added the condition, "If you still have the guts to challenge me again." Being hoisted up, the man panicked, thinking, this guy, wasn't he supposed to be a low-class specimen? As the two of them were doing that, a loud shout came from the other side. "Enough!" Everyone froze. "Don't move." Karina appeared, frowning in annoyance. Honestly, can't even get a day off, daring to brawl right in the middle of the street. They all stared at the girl, pointing her sword and shouting, "I'll throw all of you in jail, prepare yourselves." Her shout made Jin drop him and turn to look. It seems causing a little chaos finally paid off. Karina pointed in alarm. Are you the low-class fellow from the other day?" The girl showed contempt plainly on her face and in her eyes. Then Karina pointed her spear straight at Jin. "You've got guts. You arrive in the capital and start trouble right away." At that, the girl still declared arrogantly, "The lowborn will always be lowborn. There are things you should know your place about, what can be done and what cannot." But another person cut in. She hesitated as she recounted the details. "Sorry, let me interrupt for a moment. I happened to pass by and witness the whole thing. Those people were actually ambushed by the others. So I think their actions were purely self-defense." The explanation left Karina stunned. After a moment, a familiar voice sounded. "Well, he does look rather familiar." Karina glanced at the man and then asked, "You lot, are you cadets from Harnisk Academy?" After a while of talking, the girl sighed, seeming less bored. "As I expected. I hope that young lady isn't involved in this." Jin asked curiously, "Which young lady?" Karina ordered her subordinates as she replied, "Take them away. This is an internal matter, we'll handle it, you don't need to worry." He was surprised by Karina's actions. "So the Holy Knights patrol too? I thought that was the guild's duty." Outwardly she answered coldly, "The capital is vast, we're just doing our part to maintain public order." But inwardly she thought, "Honestly, I just happened to pass by while looking for snacks." Suddenly her expression turned serious. She quietly glanced over and assessed Jin. "This guy really is formidable. Those cadets from earlier weren't weak either." Then the girl turned to leave, indicating goodbye. "All right then, try not to cause more trouble in this city." Suddenly Jin shouted for her to return. "Wait, if you don't mind, I'd like you to lead me somewhere." Karina turned, puzzled, and asked, "You want me to take you somewhere?" Night had fallen. Meanwhile, at Argus's manor, Jin sat on a chair and spoke earnestly, "Hire us." Argus was taken aback by his words. "Didn't you tell me when we met to come to you if I needed help?" He asked. "It seems there are more of you than when we met last time." Jin replied casually, Something unexpected came up." He recounted the events slowly. They had encountered the bandits Argus had warned about. Seeing them being held captive, he had rescued them. Argus asked anxiously, "What about the bandits?" Jin described what he had done. "I taught them a lesson, then I left the rest to the guild to handle." Argus could only nod. "I understand." But he wondered to himself, could he really have defeated them all on his own? Thinking that, he asked, "Why did you decide to help those girls?" Jin replied calmly, "They have no relatives, they're what you call the lowborn." His gaze softened as he looked at the two kids beside him. "I thought I should at least try to find them work." Argus said with some doubt, "I don't think it's your responsibility to care for them." Jin answered calmly, "It's simply my working principle." He spoke seriously. "Whatever the reason, I saved their lives and I won't do things half-heartedly. I'll take responsibility for this to the end." Argus looked surprised at that. Meanwhile, Porwaru and the boy were deeply grateful. After a moment's thought, Argus nodded in agreement. "Very well, they may stay and work here at the manor." She asked again, overjoyed to be sure, "Is that really true?" "However," Argus added with his own intent, "I have one condition." His voice sounded slowly. "I want you to take on the role of an instructor." Jin was astonished. An instructor? A little while later, Porwaru and the boy had changed into their work clothes. Jin nodded approvingly when he saw them. "You look the part, don't you?" She bowed gratefully to Argus. "Lord Argus, we are extremely grateful." Seeing this, he replied gently, "No need to thank me." Then Argus turned to give orders to the servants. "I place my trust in you. In training them, do not show any discriminatory attitude just because they are lowborn." The two immediately obeyed. "We will follow your orders." Before leaving, Porwaru waved to Jin. "Thank you very much." On the way, Jin spoke first. "So what now? This instructor offer, surely you have an ulterior motive, right?" Argus led the way and replied calmly, "You're perceptive, aren't you? That will help a lot with this task." His eyes showed seriousness. "Although I'm not clear on your background, I want to trust that you are the right person for this request." What Argus actually wanted to ask was, "I want you to carry out a covert investigation inside Harnisk Academy." Hearing that, Jin's expression grew grave. "What exactly is this about?" Argus slowly revealed a shocking secret. Right now, this kingdom is becoming the target of many factions vying for power. Jin, puzzled, asked in return, "Surely there is still a king ruling here?" Argus's face became sorrowful. "The king is gravely ill and doesn't have much time left. For that reason, the struggle for succession has already begun quietly in the shadows." Furthermore, he added, "There are those with no legitimate claim to the throne who are scheming to seize the kingdom." Argus clenched his fist, full of anger. "They are using illegal invaders and dragging innocent people into their insidious plots." Jin, having heard the whole story, realized, "I see. So it's not only that local lord we need to watch out for." Argus's voice rang clearly. "Dangerous elements like these are hiding and operating covertly right here in the capital. We must uncover their lairs as quickly as possible." Jin continued, "And the most suspicious place is Harnisk Academy, isn't it?" Argus did not deny it. "That's exactly right." At that moment, Argus stood before a door and knocked. "I'm coming in." He opened the door and introduced to Jin. "She will be your guide into the academy." Inside the room, someone had been seated for some time. "Let me introduce her to you. My sister is currently studying at Harnisk, Milia Uten." Argus raised his hand to introduce her. Suddenly, Milia stood up and interrupted, "Brother." She looked at them haughtily. Do you mean to say you're entrusting the secret mission you mentioned before to this lowborn? Argus hurriedly scolded, Milia, that's rude. Yet Milia snapped back sharply, what is rude about it? Isn't the existence of such a lowborn an insult in itself? She gently fanned herself. That peasant-looking woman is one thing, but this cannot be entrusted to a common lowborn. Jin watched it all with amusement. Truly a prejudiced young lady, poor Argus for having such a sister. Argus apologized sincerely. Please don't pay any mind to her. Karina slipped closer and whispered to him. Although the young lady is talented, she harbors a deep hatred for those of the lowborn race. Hearing that, Jin offered, I understand. She's really not so different from her. Just then Milia waved her fan and interjected, Do you understand, brother? She listed her objections. This isn't simply an infiltration mission. He would also have to fulfill all the duties of an instructor. Finally, Milia concluded, I don't believe a lowborn has the capability to teach others, or does he actually hold the necessary qualifications? At that moment a voice rang out exposing, Jin can't even read. That truth embarrassed Jin. Don't say that out loud. Read, Milia was disappointed in his level. Then he is completely unqualified to be considered. Suddenly a sincere voice spoke up. There are many things only Jin can teach. Jin is truly extraordinary compared to any of us. Milia fell silent and carefully assessed Jin once more. A moment later she arrogantly brushed past him. Well, it seems he has enough strength to suppress and keep the students in line, doesn't he? Before leaving, her cold gaze warned. But being a teacher requires more than mere brute strength. Then Milia closed the door and stepped outside. Karina wearily rubbed her head and spoke first. About those cadets on the road, I suspected that young lady was behind them. Argus looked more helpless. I'm very sorry, I'll discipline the girl seriously. Jin sympathetically reassured. I don't mind. He quickly shifted the topic back to business. Also, as an instructor, exactly what subject do you intend me to teach? Argus promptly answered. Elemental arts. He calmly pointed out, based on my assessment, you are extremely proficient in elemental arts. Am I right? Jin was silent for a moment, then asked, which part of the elemental arts should I teach? Argus replied at once, just teach the basics. He listed, fire ignition, lightning discharge, ice formation, and healing. If you can perform even 2 of these 4 basic techniques, that will meet the requirement. Jin said nonchalantly, that's it, it's that simple. His remark left Argus blank. What do you mean by that's it? Argus couldn't believe it and asked further. Don't tell me you can use those rare elemental techniques that only a few can perform. Jin suddenly pondered an unfamiliar term, and after thinking he realized. Wait, so that bandit is actually regarded as part of the elite class in this era. The corner of Jin's mouth twitched up. How intriguing. Finally, he made his decision. Very well, I think I'll change some of this era's conventional notions a bit. In the blink of an eye, a new term was about to begin. A week passed and at Harnisk Academy. The atmosphere of the entrance examination day was extremely lively. The applicants arrived full of excitement. Among them, Hakama also came to take the exam. She looked very focused for this test. Elsewhere, Rudman warmly welcomed Argus and Jin into the school. Oh my, it's our honor to be escorted here by you personally. He was polite upon seeing Argus among the holy knights. I suppose Unit 7 must be quite busy. Please don't worry too much about that. It's simply our turn to carry out the duty. Jin, standing behind and hearing those words, grew suspicious. Turn? What do you mean? Argus did not hide it and calmly explained to him. Once a year, the Holy Knights take turns selecting a member to serve as a special instructor for this academy. This year, that responsibility has been assigned to Unit 7. I understand. Argus's words left Jin even more pensive. Am I really suited for this job? Rudman caught that reflection in his gaze. Rudman led the two to a room and invited them. "This way, please." He opened the door and introduced, "The principal and the board are waiting for you inside." Inside the room, the principal watched them with a furtive look in her eyes. Argus entered and bowed respectfully. "Long time no see, principal." The principal smiled slightly and praised, "Since you graduated as the top student, you've quickly become a remarkably prominent knight in a short time." While the two conversed, Jin kept observing everything in the room. "Thank you for agreeing to assist us. It is a duty I must fulfill." The principal leaned back in her chair and said calmly, "I've also heard some rumors." Her gaze implied something, not only concerning elemental arts, but you are also entangled in disputes among internal factions. Her tone remained calm but carried a threat. "I understand you cannot deploy many people, because everyone is very busy." The principal fixed her sharp eyes forward. "Even so, that does not give you the right to show disrespect within this academy." She was in fact referring to Jin. "Certainly. Don't tell me you intend to let this fellow be an instructor here." The three of them gave Jin no favorable looks. Jin sighed helplessly at their attitude. Argus bowed once more and defended Jin. "You can rest assured. He possesses abilities far beyond anyone in my Unit 7. At least in terms of practical combat skills, even he has acknowledged Jin's talent." The principal frowned in thought for a moment, then decided, "If you assert that, I'll accept it for now." Just as the principal was troubled, Jita beside her spoke up. "But how do we handle this? Principal, I strongly oppose it." He pointed a finger at Jin and spat insults. "At this sacred, historic academy, there has never been precedent for allowing the low-born race to teach. This position is not meant for an inferior class. Are you trying to insult our academy?" Those words slightly moved the principal. She turned and asked, "Mr. Jita has spoken, Mr. Rudman, what is your stance?" Rudman feigned thought and offered, "I agree with him. Most of our students come from noble lineages. If a lowborn is allowed to teach, it will surely face fierce resistance from students and even the faculty." The principal listened and appeared satisfied, feigning a helpless sigh. "As you can see, my thoughts are essentially the same as theirs. But let him present himself and we'll see." Hearing that, Jin slowly stepped forward. He bowed respectfully to the principal and introduced himself. "Forgive me for the late introduction. I'm from Kodama village. My name is Jin Shidu." Jin's demeanor made the principal evaluate him inwardly. Despite the severe insults, he maintained an oddly calm composure. Jin met them with a sharp, confident look. "I fully understand your concerns. However, I would like to ask a small question. Am I unfit to be an instructor solely because I belong to the lowborn race? Or is it because I lack actual ability?" The principal acted magnanimous and spoke in flowery terms. "Obviously the latter. As long as one has the ability, everything else is irrelevant." She then issued a challenge to Jin. "So can you prove your competence?" Argus seized the opportunity and suggested, "If that's the case, why don't we run a test?" Everyone went out to the training yard, at Harnisk Academy's elemental arts practice ground. Jita stood opposite Jin and began to explain. "Since today is the entrance exam, there are almost no students around. At least this avoids any chance of losing face in front of a crowd." Jin remained silent, merely watching and offering no reply. The principal, standing between them, announced the rules. "The rules are simple. The two of you will duel using only elemental arts. You are here applying for the elemental arts instructor position, so seeing your power firsthand is the best way to evaluate you, isn't it?" The students who witnessed the scene began to speculate. "What's happening? I heard there's going to be a friendly match." "I think this is the first time I've seen Mr. Jita fight." Milia couldn't help but glance over at the chatter. Hearing the prattle, Jin internally scolded. What a waste of time. The principal and everyone outside focused their attention. Very well, let's see what a member of the lowborn race can actually do. Even Argus felt nervous watching Jin fight. This is the first time I've seen him battle with my own eyes. He knew well that those from lower races often had weak physiques. Even if they possessed divine power, they could usually only manifest a small portion. For that reason, Argus could only silently pray for Jin. I just hope my decision wasn't a mistake. Are you ready? Jita smiled with malice. He didn't hesitate and launched a fireball at Jin. I'll strike first. But Jita's attack was easily evaded by Jin. The students outside watched in awe. Jita glanced at that group of students and felt all the more pleased with himself. He continued to gather power, sending bolts of lightning straight forward. No matter how strong the technique, Jin easily leapt aside and avoided every strike. Jita sneered inwardly. All you do is run away, truly worthless lowborn trash. He remained confident. I may not have become a holy knight, but I graduated top of my class from this academy. You have no chance of being my match. Jita showed no mercy and unleashed another ultimate move. No matter how formidable Jita's strikes were, Jin still easily avoided them all. Jin thought to himself, honestly, I shouldn't use this power against a mere human. But due to Jita's continuous provocation, he was forced to act. I'll show you a small portion of it. A massive orb of power materialized directly above Jita. The energy sphere slammed him into the ground. The principal and Rudman widened their eyes in shock at what had happened. Even Argus couldn't hide his surprise. Milia couldn't contain her astonishment when she saw Jin's technique. Jita was crushed to the ground and couldn't get up. What is this? What just happened? Jin stepped closer to him and taunted. I merely adjusted the gravity around you a bit. Haven't you ever heard of that kind of elemental art? He smiled sardonically. It seems I'll have plenty to teach at this academy. Jin clenched his gloves and announced to everyone present, not only lessons for the students, but lessons for all of you as well. Jita was pinned under Jin's power and couldn't move. He struggled to get up, gritting his teeth as he glared at Jin. Jin calmly snapped his fingers. After his snap, the orb pressing on Jita vanished and released him. Jita, failing to gauge the situation, continued to criticize. Jin, what the hell did you just do? That was clearly elemental magic, don't you know that? Shaking with anger, Jita kept pointing at Jin and shouting, I've never heard of such a strange elemental art. You must be using some cheap trick. The principal and Rudman could only look on helplessly at his behavior. This incident truly made the two of them acknowledge Jin's strength. It seemed everything was over. The students outside who had witnessed the match couldn't help whispering among themselves. Milia had already guessed the technique Jin used. Without a doubt, it was a very high-level elemental art. She still couldn't believe it. How could that be? Unlike us, who evolved under the protection of elementals, that lowborn race shouldn't be able to possess any divine power at all. Milia glanced at Jin with curious, suspicious eyes. So what is he after all? Who is that man? A week later, a solemn voice rang out across the campus. The principal stood on the rostrum and addressed all the students. This academy does more than teach books. Its core goal is to train true warriors, those capable of annihilating the Hollow Ones. Anyone who cannot keep up with the curriculum will be expelled from the academy without mercy. In addition, the principal issued an enticing invitation. However, for those who complete the program, joining the ranks of the Holy Knights will no longer be a distant dream. All outcomes depend on your own abilities. Milia's group stood above looking down, remarking, We received quite a few new students this year, didn't we? Indeed, it seems commoners make up a large portion. while Milia was lost in thought. An orange-haired student approached and started a conversation with her. "Milia, it's rare to see you at the entrance ceremony. I thought you were the type who never cared about others." The two stood chatting. The orange-haired boy asked, "What about you? If there were a prestigious noble among the new students, you want to curry favor to save face, right?" Suddenly, the orange-haired boy panicked as he looked down. "What's going on down there?" His attention focused on Jin, sitting in the instructor's row. Why is a member of a low-born race seated in the instructor's row? Simply because he's a professor. Milia, reading the orange-haired youth's thoughts from his expression, asked, "From your perspective, how do you judge that man?" The orange-haired youth stammered in embarrassment. "Yet, he's just someone from a lower race." Milia maintained her haughty demeanor and judged, "Perhaps you're not wrong." Jin sat below, observing everything around him. He glanced at the students with a disapproving look. "This school is truly massive. The investigation will certainly take a lot of time." "Those gazes really make me uncomfortable," Jin thought. "The first thing I need to do is erase this lowborn label." Even the instructors beside him seemed reluctant to sit next to him. "If this continues, I'll draw more attention than necessary. Never mind the investigation. I'm becoming the most suspicious person in this academy. First, I must earn their recognition." Everything else continued peacefully at the academy. Jita stood on the podium and began introducing today's lesson. "We will begin our course on elemental arts today. Make sure you stay vigilant so the rookies don't surpass you." He smiled with delight. "Yes, that's exactly what I want to convey." Seeing only a handful of students in class, Jita angrily scolded, "What's going on? Why is attendance so sparse today? Huh, are you all lacking enthusiasm?" Milia sat above and sighed helplessly. She understood the reason. Jita was smug inwardly. Who would want to attend a class taught by that lowborn? He himself was the cause of today's absence. I deliberately spread word everywhere that a lowborn would be teaching today. Jita feigned a warm smile and invited Jin up. "How inconvenient. Very well, let's begin. Mr. Jin, please introduce yourself." Jin did not hesitate to stand before everyone and introduced himself. "I'll begin the introduction. My name is Jin Shidu. I was assigned here to teach you the fundamentals of elemental arts in the coming period. Nice to meet you all." A red-haired student crossed his arms and challenged, "Do you really think you're qualified to do this?" Noticing his attitude, Jin replied calmly, "That's for you all to judge." He was not angry and even offered a proposal. "If you find my lessons worthless, you are free to skip my classes. But there is one mandatory rule you must remember." Jin clenched his fist and warned everyone in a solemn tone, "Never, under any circumstances, use this power to harm people." He began the lecture. "The nature of elemental arts is the ability to nullify the super-regenerative capabilities of the corrupted. However, this suppressive effect does not work on the human body. You will only cause them physical wounds. Do you know why?" Jin tightened his grip and declared, "Because this power was created with the sole purpose of destroying the corrupted. Therefore, I demand that you do not abuse this ability." A classmate laughed and taunted, "Are you stupid? Power is just power." A gray-haired student deliberately provoked, mocking, "I was curious what a lowborn could teach, and you tell us not to use elemental arts." His words made the whole class laugh and whispered tauntingly. Jin was not particularly surprised by their attitude. He only sighed softly in resignation and said, "If you think I lack ability, then try to prove it." This time Jin taunted in return, "Use your strongest technique to attack me." He even made a wager. "If you can scratch me even the slightest bit, I promise to disappear from this place and never return." The gray-haired student laughed loudly, triumphant. "Don't cry and beg when you regret it. Lowborn, don't wait until it's too late to back down." Jita next to him could only clutch his head and scold. "Hey, you idiot, stop right now. Are you trying to hit me too?" The gray-haired boy unleashed his power, releasing a massive burst of energy straight at Jin, creating a powerful shockwave. He smugly awaited the result. Suddenly, a small dagger emerged from the smoke and flew straight forward, impaling the wall behind him and shattering a large section of it. Jin slowly appeared from the smoke and said calmly, "If I had wanted to, you would have died right after that attack." He looked at the gray-haired student and offered a lesson. Judging others by appearances alone is a deadly mistake. The orange-haired student, still stunned by what he'd seen, asked, "What was that just now? Was that elemental art?" All the students now showed caution toward Jin. He spoke in a clear, authoritative tone. "You believed I was weak because I come from a low-born race, didn't you? But the truth is I'm far stronger than you." Jin stared at him. "So what do you think you should call me? Let me give you the answer." The recent attack served as a lesson to establish Jin's authority. He declared, "From now on, you will call me Professor." Jin smiled faintly and emphasized, "Does anyone here truly understand the conditions required to activate elemental arts?" He looked at everyone below, then fixed his gaze on the student who had attacked him. "You who just attacked me, answer my question." He stood up, flustered and anxious. "Isn't it simply based on one's imagination?" He immediately summoned magic, thinking while explaining. Mages concentrate and raise their mana, then project images from their minds to the elementals to materialize them. Isn't that basic knowledge? Hearing that, the corner of Jin's mouth twitched. Imagination does play an important role, but it's not the decisive condition for activation. As soon as he finished speaking, he summoned a source of energy in his palm. Elementals truly unleash their power only after they receive a specific frequency of wavelength. The student's face went blank. "A frequency of wavelength," Jin continued. "Basically, there are 8 main types of wavelengths." He carefully demonstrated and explained in turn. A flame burst in his right hand. Incineration. From the other hand, he called forth a bolt of lightning. Electrocution. Next came a warming energy, healing, and finally a chilling gust, freezing. These are powers you should already have mastered. The students' faces froze. Jin continued, "Beyond those I just named, there is also the ability to manipulate gravity." From the other hand, a radiant mana manifested. Light control, air pressure manipulation. And the power I used earlier, spatial shielding. Witnessing that, Jita thought in amazement, "Can you really master all 8 types of elemental art?" Jin looked at the elemental arts in his hands with pride. "Just like the electric spear you hurled at me earlier, visualization is an indispensable factor." He hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. Folding his arms with a nonchalant air, "Shall we begin the official lecture?" Time passed until the class ended. Jin strode alone down the corridor, thinking to himself as he walked. "All right, it's come to this. I need to carry out an investigation in this huge academy." Just then he heard some students whispering outside. "That professor," Jin watched their reactions. Wherever he went, students were bustling about. "I still haven't found any truly suspicious spots. Maybe I should search the restricted areas that students aren't allowed to go." He spotted Milia standing nearby. His brows knit as he glanced toward her. A sixth sense seemed to warn Milia as well, and she turned to look at him. Jin ignored her and walked past calmly, but Milia hurriedly called out, "Hey, you there, where exactly are you from?" He turned back and replied sarcastically, "So you're not simply someone of a lower caste, are you?" Milia snapped back angrily. "You're definitely not ordinary, I have to admit that." After saying that, Milia's expression grew sullen and disappointed. A lowborn shouldn't be able to wield all types of elemental arts. Jin looked puzzled. "I just explained this in class. Anyone can do it as long as they can distinguish the wavelengths. Milia sighed. Don't talk about it so lightly. She glanced as other students whispered. All types of elemental arts in one person's hands. Really, Milia asserted confidently. If it were that easy, you wouldn't attract this much attention. Then she turned. Let's find somewhere else to talk. Before long, the two had arrived at a deserted spot, with no one passing by. Milia suddenly turned and asked, So, are you willing to answer my question now? Jin remained calm. It's simple. For the past 100 million years, I was someone from ancient times sleeping in the village of Kodama. Milia walked on and remarked, You're really good at joking. She stopped and spoke seriously. Then let me ask again. What did you do 100 million years ago? Jin was somewhat puzzled by the odd question. A lot happened. At that time I was a spy. Milia frowned in doubt. A spy, he smiled and explained. Someone who served the nation. I fought against countless villains. Jin recalled those times, hazy images surfacing in his mind. Although those events occurred 100 million years ago, he still remembered them clearly as if they were yesterday. Now reminiscing, Jin smiled nostalgically. How nostalgic? Milia, still doubtful, asked further. I wonder why someone like you ended up falling into a 100 million year sleep. He answered plainly and frankly. Because I failed. Jin slowly recounted. I once thought I could handle everything on my own, if only I had tried harder. He emphasized, and the price was that I lost everything in utter helplessness. I also accepted this teaching position, hoping that you all would help me when I faced difficulties. Milia wondered how much of his words were true. After finishing, Jin asked blankly, By the way, which way are we heading? Milia walked ahead casually. Anyway, I think I should fulfill my duty as a guide. A while later, Milia led him to an old, dusty room full of cobwebs. We're here. Jin stepped in, puzzled. Where is this place? Milia explained frankly. This is the room where instructors store materials for classes. Jin stroked his chin, wondering. So this is just a storage room. He began to look around. Suddenly he noticed a small owl statue on a bookshelf. When his gaze met the statue, Jin's eyes narrowed as if sensing something strange. He immediately turned to Milia and asked, Why did you bring me here? She pulled out a stack of papers. It means I'm conducting an investigation too. There is a very unusual space right next to this room. It's large enough to form another chamber. Milia asked, suspicious, right? If there's anything hidden, it's definitely here. Jin was silent for a moment, then replied, I understand. The moment he touched the owl statue, a hidden passageway appeared. Seeing the dark passage, Jin said, It seems your guess was completely correct. Milia wondered, pointing at the passage. How could you tell? He replied nonchalantly. Although this area is covered in thick dust. This exact spot is oddly clean. The rest is based on intuition honed by my experience. Then he decisively stepped inside. I'll go in and check. You should wait out here. Milia panicked and said, Wait, I want to come too. Jin halted and warned bluntly. If there's something inside, it could be a corrupted. This will be dangerous. You know that, right? Milia frowned and affirmed, pounding her chest confidently. Don't underestimate me. After all, my grades are among the top this year. I also possess skills not inferior to my brothers. Hearing that, Jin smiled slightly and nodded. All right, I'll trust your ability. Thus Jin led the way, with Milia carefully following behind. As they walked, Jin sensed, this path leads quite deep underground. Milia thought inwardly, light manipulation techniques really are convenient. After some distance, Jin suddenly said, If this were a fantasy story, I feel like a monster is about to appear. Milia paused for a moment, then asked, By the way, returning to our earlier topic, if you fought villains for so long, have you gotten any leads about the suspect? Jin forced a smile. You're asking too many questions for one working day. Later he sighed thoughtfully, I guess. There's a possibility Lord Rudman is also involved in this. Milia was stunned. How do you know? Jin reasoned. He appears very composed in conversation. But when he's not speaking to anyone, his mind seems elsewhere. That's a trait often seen in those forced to act against their original intentions. He recalled and continued. His vigilance is unusually strong, but I pretended to be unaware. Milia frowned, thinking back. Before this, I thought Professor Jita was the suspicious one. Jin smiled and replied, That's impossible for an instructor like him. All his emotions are written plainly on his face, so he must be a kind-hearted person with no guile. Then he looked down the path ahead. All right, let's move on. Suddenly the two saw a scene of swirling dust and white mist before them. Milia looked up and observed. It's hard to believe there's such a vast space under the academy's basement. While walking normally, Jin stopped dead. Milia was briefly frightened. What's wrong? He exclaimed in surprise. I didn't expect it to be in a place like this. Jin looked at the sturdy gate before him, thinking. The gate leading to the laboratory Kagura left everywhere. Jin raised his eyes to the towering door blocking his way, silently admiring. This is the laboratory Kagura left behind. He studied the pale blue light covering the door intently. Thoughts raced through his mind. This door is protected by nanoparticles. It must be. At the same time, Milia stared at the gigantic door before them, unable to hide her suspicion. A gate this huge under the academy. She stepped closer to Jin and lowered her voice to ask, Do you think we can go inside? He lightly touched the door and replied calmly, Basically, you need an access key. Milia blinked in confusion. An access key. Jin kept scanning the surroundings, his tone steady. Think of it as a conduit to open this door. Saying that, he quietly propped his hand on his chin and fell into thought. Memories suddenly rushed in. The light from the small key on Hakuma's neck flashed in his recollection. He analyzed carefully. In that Kodama village, Hakuma inherited the key. It's very likely someone here inherited a similar one. Jin frowned slightly. Before the words finished, a faint light immediately emanated from his hand. Jin placed his hand on the sturdy steel door. Immediately, the system's voice echoed in the silent space, confirming highest-level access privileges. The giant door slowly swung open. A blast of icy air rushed out. Jin stood calmly until the door was fully open, then sighed softly. The one intending to sow chaos in this nation is the one holding the access key. He led Milia inside. Before them was a colossal monster imprisoned in an iron cage. Milia recoiled a few steps in fright when she saw it, her voice trembling. This horror is right beneath the academy. She turned to Jin, eyes full of doubt. But how did you open the door? Didn't you say you needed an access key? Jin continued forward calmly and replied, Ancient people are very special. Milia watched him, a multitude of questions rising in her mind. Could he really be a person from 100 million years ago? Jin seemed unconcerned with Milia's thoughts. He strolled along, slowly inspecting each monster imprisoned in the iron cages. Suddenly Jin stopped and sighed softly. It's really strange. He furrowed his brow slightly, full of doubt. Why were they captured so obediently like this? Jin looked at the other monsters and pondered silently. Even the other corrupted showed no sign of wanting to attack. He suddenly recalled the monster he had encountered earlier. The corrupted the bandits kept in a cage had been just as quiet. Jin was thoughtful. Most importantly, he stared silently at the giant beast before him, questions swelling in his heart. How did they even bring such a massive corrupted all the way in here? At the same time, Milia gently waved her fan and suddenly said, It seems my brother's suspicions that the academy is hiding something were completely correct. She frowned and lowered her voice to consider. If we stage an ambush here, the mastermind behind this will surely reveal themselves. At that moment, Jin abruptly interrupted. No. He looked at Milia and explained calmly. Before doing that, we need to seal off the academy and eliminate all of these corrupted. Hearing that, Milia immediately panicked and shouted, "Are you telling me to just let that criminal escape?" Jin quickly replied, tone tinged with reproach. "I understand how you feel, but what if these corrupted suddenly lose control?" His voice grew low, each word directly frightening Milia. "The ones who will be in danger are the students at the school, the people right above us right now." Jin briefly evoked images of students laughing and chatting in the courtyard, calmly reminding her, "Your brother would surely prioritize everyone's safety over capturing the culprit." At that, Milia gradually regained her composure and said quietly, "You make a fair point." Jin nodded slightly and continued, "Besides, I have a bad feeling." His tone dropped. "My instincts at times like this are usually very accurate. I want to examine this laboratory more thoroughly." Jin looked at Milia, his voice softening into a request. "Contact Argus and close the academy for me. Can I trust you with this?" Milia immediately nodded in agreement. As soon as he received the answer, he turned and walked away, sighing inwardly, "All right." Jin quietly glanced up at the intricate clock hanging on the wall, then decisively stepped deeper into the laboratory, walking while silently thinking. In this situation, he hoped to find some clue. At that moment, the ticking of time from the clock sounded, cold and echoing in the space. Back at the school, Jita strolled along amid the murmurs and gossip of those around him. He clenched his fists and glared angrily at the students who were pointing at him. Jita gritted his teeth, fury flaring inside. "Because of those lowborn creatures, my honor has been completely destroyed." He snapped. Could he really control 8 types of elemental magic? He's certainly using some trickery. Jita stamped his foot in annoyance, screaming inwardly, "I swear I'll strip his mask off with my own hands." Just then, a steady voice sounded behind him, "Mr. Jita." The stern principal looked at him and said in a low reprimand, "The students are starting to feel frightened, so could you stop those strange actions?" Jita jolted. "P-principal." The principal sighed, tone mocking, I'm not here to judge your personal tastes." He was taken aback hearing that. She treats it as a pastime. Suddenly she called out loudly, "By the way, have you seen Mr. Rudman?" Jita hesitated and asked, "You mean Mr. Rudman?" He rubbed his chin in thought and replied, "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen him since the opening ceremony earlier today." Before he finished, the principal sighed in exasperation. "This is troubling." She held her head, voice full of regret. "I had something I wanted his opinion on regarding classes for the new students." Suddenly the principal stopped, her gaze sharpening as she glanced upward. "What is that?" She looked at the dark cloud in the sky, hesitating. "What is that thing?" Elsewhere, Milia was hurrying up from the deep underground chamber. She rushed straight through the heavy hatch and stepped out into the upper corridor. Stopping, Milia doubled over, clutching her chest, gasping to catch her breath. She told herself she had to report this to her brother quickly. But at that moment a cold voice cut in. "What are you intending to report?" The instant she heard it, Milia went pale and trembled, unable to speak. Rudman stood in the middle of the room as if he'd been waiting for Milia for a long time, lowering his voice threateningly. "Miss Milia Uton." She saw the sly grin on his face and screamed in terror. Meanwhile, another heavy steel door opened behind Jin. A crimson light spilled out from the other side. Jin inwardly exclaimed, "What the hell is this?" He stood stunned, staring into the room as red light washed over his face. Before Jin was a blazing red sphere of energy pulsing continuously, like the heart of a living creature. Jin scrutinized the control panel, suspicion growing. Could Kagura have made these things? He glanced around. and his eyes immediately settled on a mysterious box resting on the table. Jin opened the box. Inside was a block-like device and a strange liquid. He thought to himself, a communication system and nanoblood injectors Kagura left behind. Jin activated the cuboid device, full of anticipation, hoping he had left a clue to explain what was happening. The moment the device powered up, a halting voice rang out. Kagura's image and familiar voice appeared. "Can you hear me, Jin? It seems you finally made it here." Kagura spoke calmly. "I figured you would, since this place is the closest to the laboratory where you woke." He suddenly leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Yes, in this very laboratory we once built an astonishing device." Jin looked back at the strange liquid as Kagura's voice continued. Part of that device's function was sealed inside the nanoparticles. He pushed up his glasses and said smugly, "Indeed, I am a genius. What do you think this device is?" Kagura exclaimed excitedly, "It's a tool for instantaneous teleportation." Jin froze and stammered, "Instant teleportation." At that moment, the image of the giant monster flashed through his mind again. Jin stared at the strange red object pulsing in the center of the room, unable to hide his panic. Unbelievable. The giant beast stood motionless in its iron cage, and countless smaller monsters were locked up around it. The clock hands kept moving, ticking steadily. The great clock displayed the passage of time in an endless cycle. The grotesque crimson time machine across the way filled one with dread and horror. Jin frowned with worry, thinking, a machine for spatial teleportation. He imagined its immense power with the example of an apple. It could connect two separate points in space. This was a technique even 100 million years ago couldn't achieve. If that's true, the strange incidents tie into what Argus mentioned about corrupted suddenly appearing in the capital. Jin linked them to the machine before him. Were they brought here by this teleportation device? He rubbed his chin in thought, even the corrupted in the main hall. Kagura on screen continued explaining, pointing at the machine he built. And this is exactly that spatial teleportation device. Jin looked on in amazement. It seemed so different. He looked up, comparing the pale blue machine on the screen with the horrific crimson one before him. So what exactly is this? Time continued to rush forward. The red machine suddenly flared with intense light. The power radiating from it made Jin wary as well. The enormous beast in the cage was also bathed in the light. It suddenly awakened, its power surging. Immediately, a beam of light teleported the monster elsewhere. At the capital's side, Milia rushed over in a panic. "Lord Argus, there's an emergency happening in the capital." Argus looked up at the sky worriedly and replied, "I am already aware of the situation." He frowned. If that's the case, this really is the worst-case scenario. Monsters were falling from the sky in terrifying numbers. In another corner, Rudman feigned ignorance and asked, "What's going on? Why does your face look so grave?" But his gaze was utterly dark. Milia stepped back, ready to fight. "Get out of my way. You're involved in this, aren't you?" Rudman's tone remained calm. "Oh, so you've already realized that. It seems you've been secretly investigating all this time." He sneered. "However, you're one step too late." Milia frowned. "What do you mean?" Rudman dropped the pretense. "Today is the day the plan is executed. That's what I meant." He sighed reproachfully. Actually, the original plan was to be a bit later, but because someone kept lurking around snooping, I accelerated the schedule. Rudman's eyes lit up at the mention of that name. He referred to Jin. "That man will certainly become a major threat to my plan." I sensed it by instinct. "That guy is every bit as troublesome as your brother." Rudman pointed to the passage behind Milia. "In fact, right now he has already found that secret passage. He is down there at this very moment. You know, I want to uproot that threat immediately." Milia smiled faintly and channeled her magic. Do you really think you can defeat me? Rudman frowned with contempt. Of course I can, because I possess a power that cannot be stopped. He spoke loudly, unaware that behind Rudman, Hakama had silently approached and was holding a large jar ready to strike him from behind. Milia saw that too but remained silent, holding her breath and waiting. While Rudman continued rambling, I'll show you its power. As the magic surged forth, a loud crashing sound echoed. Milia smirked slightly. Hakama exhaled in relief. The girl smiled. I won. Milia asked puzzled. Why are you here? Hakama replied. I was looking for Lord Jin. The girl calmed herself. Things outside are becoming extremely chaotic. We very much need Lord Jin's support. Hakama turned her head to look back. Kyudo had said she saw Lord Jin go inside here. Milia hesitantly observed. She's a first-year student, Kyudo bowed awkwardly. Yes, my name is Kyudo Plaza. The girl nervously hid behind Hakama. Hakama, is this really okay? You just attacked a teacher. Hakama's voice was calm. It will be fine. The girl pointed and explained. He hasn't seen our faces yet. We can pin all the blame on that young lady. Milia gritted her teeth in anger, thinking, that brat, don't call me young lady. Footsteps outside grew increasingly loud. Hakama turned her head around. Jin also arrived just in time. Hakama shouted, Lord Jin. He looked around in confusion. What just happened? Hakama grabbed his sleeve. Lord Jin, things outside are going very badly. Jin bowed his head and replied solemnly, I know. The corrupted that had been locked inside the laboratory had all disappeared. Milia also panicked as she realized this. Everyone quickly ran outside. The scene below the city wall was utter chaos. Fires were spreading. People were being attacked by monsters and fleeing in panic. Some of the monsters could even fly, easily striking humans. Each of their steps made the ground tremble. The lead creature was huge and muscular, with long tentacles around its face like an octopus. A roar from the monster echoed through the air. Milia covered her mouth in horror. Is the capital in danger? Jin gritted his teeth. I made a mistake in my judgment. I should have destroyed that machine from the start. Hakama urgently pointed. Jin, look up there. The giant beast continued to roar fiercely. A large sphere of magical energy was forming in its mouth, aimed straight for the capital. Kyudo guessed fearfully. That giant seems to be heading straight for the royal castle. Milia worried. If this continues, the royal family will be in grave danger. Jin took out a syringe. This is my fault. I'll take responsibility and deal with this. He injected the syringe into his arm. A surge of power flowed through his veins. The result of this power upgrade was a function that simplified the spatial teleportation process. Jin recalled Kagura's words. Thanks to the energy stored in the nanoparticles, usage is limited to once per day. The range was limited, so it could only be used for short distances visible to the naked eye. The monster fired a beam of magical light straight toward the castle. Jin simultaneously teleported to another spot. He didn't hesitate to step directly in front of the attack. Using a magical shield to block the strike, he could still appear anywhere instantly. A giant serpent roared violently in the city center, driving the populace into desperate, panicked flight. Meanwhile, a soldier sprinted down a long corridor, trying to raise the alarm. A young woman rushed in, shouting for the guild master and warning that a giant corruptor was outside the city wall. The guild master calmly replied that he was already aware of the situation outside. At that moment he said regretfully, "Unfortunately, there's nothing more we can do." He explained, "All those capable of fighting have gone out to help evacuate civilians." The holy knights who were still mobile were charging into fierce battle. The girl asked in surprise what he meant. The guild master began to reveal the knight's situation. Half of them were away on missions outside the capital. The girl was stunned. At that moment, a shadowy creature with rows of yellow eyes appeared, destroying everything in its path. The guild master realized this was a calculated plan. They attacked precisely when the knights were absent. He lamented, "If the commander were here, we might still have a chance." But the gigantic beam of energy was still hurtling straight toward the kingdom's castle. Suddenly, a soldier pointed out the window, his voice desperate. "You must see this." The guild master looked out, and the old general's expression completely changed to utter astonishment. The protagonist generated a massive energy shield, stopping the creature's devastating attack. From the window, the guild master and his subordinates witnessed an unbelievable sight. The young woman recognized him and smiled with delight. "That man, he's from Kodama village." The giant monster stood at a distance, watching the city and preparing to continue its rampage. The hero quickly leapt from the rooftop down to the ground. He landed with a blue aura of energy surrounding his entire body. In that moment, the young man concentrated a terrifying amount of power into his palm. A colossal beam of blue energy shot straight at the giant monster. The white-haired warrior faced the enemy with a serious, fiercely determined gaze. The attack struck the monster's shoulder, making it feel the damage clearly. The protagonist realized its mass was too great to be felled by a single blow. Moreover, the earlier teleportation had consumed more energy than he expected. So he decided to draw his energy sword and finish it with brute force. Holding the weapon, he prepared to fight and smiled. "By the way, time to warm up a bit." Then the swordsman charged with full force, slashing out a horrific energy blade. The strike hit home. The giant monster roared in pain and fury. The hero immediately sprang high into the air to continue the assault. He knew the monster would regenerate, but the previous blow had bought him some time. With intense focus, the young man employed a special skill. He decided to apply the basic principles of nanomachines to the fight. He nullified his body weight by manipulating gravitational forces. His feet touched the ground as lightly as if he had no weight. Then he generated wind by controlling atmospheric pressure to move at incredible speed. Meanwhile, a soldier fell and was about to be attacked by another monster. But a gigantic fireball flew in. Exploding on the monster's body and saving him, someone shouted, "We're here to help." The soldier recognized that these youths were students of Harisk Academy. One of them thanked the soldiers for their bravery. Two wolf-eared students prepared to fight as the capital was in danger. They were surrounded by two monsters and knew they had to give it their all. Suddenly, the protagonist stomped the ground hard, creating a shockwave. In an instant, he cleaved both monsters that threatened the students in two. The youngsters were astonished by the sudden arrival and the power of the white-haired youth. One asked, "Is that person of a lower species?" The other confirmed. The hero rushed toward the giant, knowing its regeneration would take some time. However, the monster's arm had already fully regenerated, and it roared fiercely. It fired two beams of energy from its shoulders toward the warrior. With supreme agility, the hero evaded by leaping up at the precise moment. He realized that aside from the previous strike, this monster wasn't a major threat. The young man advanced down the street, cutting down every monster in his path. He decided to finish the giant before it could attack again. The swordsman moved ever faster, rescuing civilians while slaying monsters. With a determined smile, he focused his power to accelerate even more. Then he hurled himself straight toward the main target to finish it. He leaped high and brought down a terrifying vertical slash, cracking the ground. The devastating cut struck the giant's body. The many-eyed monster was stunned, not understanding what had just happened. In the distance, the knights watched in shock at his power. The girls on the rooftop followed, speechless with amazement. Then the white-haired youth lunged forward with terrifying speed, continuously unleashing a series of extremely fast sword strikes across the giant's body. The green energy slashes landed, causing massive damage. From above, the hero observed the result, the slashes encircling the monster. He landed, facing the enemy as it prepared to counterattack. Holding the glowing sword, he prepared the final blow and declared, "This ends now." With all his strength, he delivered a final, devastating slash. The monster was cleaved apart by dozens of green energy blades. A massive burst of green energy exploded in the middle of the city, illuminating everything. The blast was so tremendous it could be seen from afar, even beyond the kingdom's great wall. Inside the castle, the guild master and the young woman heard the explosion and looked up in astonishment. "What's happening?" the guild master asked, clearly worried. The protagonist landed stylishly, as the giant dissolved into green smoke. Who exactly is that man? The guild master wondered. 3 days passed, and the city began to be rebuilt after the giant's attack. On the streets, the white-haired youth stood looking out from a building window. In the room, he stretched and thought to himself. Despite the chaos, the damage wasn't too severe. He sat on the bed, telling himself, "It's all thanks to the Holy Knight's abilities." Many knights couldn't fight because they were on alert for the giant corruptors. Thanks to that, cleanup proceeded quickly, and the knights actively aided the civilians. The academy was sealed off for investigation, and Professor Rudman, suspected of masterminding it, was finally arrested. Other professors and the principal suspected of involvement were also taken away. He lay back on the bed thinking, "The academy is closed and I've only been gone 1 day." But he realized this incident had presented him with a new challenge. He could handle groups of monsters, but he couldn't defeat them all at once to protect everyone. Conclusion: he needed to become even stronger. To do that, he picked up the blue cube his friend had left in the laboratory. But at that moment a noise came from the door. He asked, "Who's there?" The protagonist went out to open the door, and the white-haired young man faced a blonde girl in an elegant ball gown. She smiled. "I've come to take you somewhere." She called him master, which surprised him a little. He felt odd and asked why she had come. The girl replied, "My brother sent me." She explained that her brother wanted to thank him and discuss an important matter. Jin asked, "You came all the way here just to call me?" She confirmed. She said, "It would be rude to send a servant to summon an important person like you." Representing the Olton family, she came in person, which made him a bit embarrassed. He asked, "You won't call me a lowborn anymore?" The girl struck a dramatic pose. "I've reconsidered. We shouldn't judge by appearances. We must respect everyone. Therefore, I hope to receive your guidance." At that moment, the eared girl appeared at the door. Jin called her name. She said, "I was bored, so I came to visit you." The blonde girl, annoyed and scornful, called her Potato Girl. She complained about the girl's forwardness. Jin reminded her, "You just said you'd reconsidered." They arrived at the Argus family's vast and luxurious mansion. A servant of the residence came out to greet and welcome the young lady. The butler called the 2 children to lead the way. They cheerfully accepted. The white-haired young man observed. They seem used to this. The boy led him everywhere. He asked if they had been injured in the chaos. The boy replied no. The girl explained that everyone in the residence had protected them because they were very strong and skilled. He was glad to hear they were treated well. The maid praised his bravery in the battle. He wondered where she had heard the news. The blonde girl answered, "From Lord Argus." She said spreading news of his feat was her duty as a disciple, which made him even more embarrassed. She turned to the two children. "You should follow Master's example." The boy leaned closer and whispered, "Miss Milia was very strict before, but lately she's become gentler." Jin thought to himself, "That's quite a change." The group continued, ascending a grand staircase that led to a door. The blue-haired maid knocked and announced, "Master Jin has arrived." Upon entering the room, the white-haired young man faced two men waiting for him. One was the guild master with wolf ears, his gaze stern and intimidating. The blonde girl's brother invited him to sit. The two children watched curiously. Everyone sat down. The knight apologized for summoning him abruptly, but Jin said it was fine. The armored man introduced the person beside him. "This is the guild master of the royal capital, Lord Harden Gunslot." The man stood and shook his hand. "Pleased to meet you." Sitting down, the guild master said he had witnessed the display of his abilities during the incident. "Honestly, if you hadn't stopped that monster, our country would have fallen into crisis." He bowed his head in thanks on behalf of the entire populace for saving the nation. But Jin replied modestly, "I only defeated the giant monster. The holy knights are the ones who handled the rest. They are the ones who deserve thanks." The guild master praised his humility and thought to himself that the young man had no greed at all. Jin asked, "Is that all?" The answer was no. Harden revealed, "Because of this incident, the royal family wants to meet him." Jin was astonished. The guild master spoke seriously that first they needed to clarify one matter. With a piercing gaze, he asked bluntly, "Who are you really?" He explained that with the guild's resources, no information could be hidden from him. Harden apologized for the intrusion, but he couldn't find any information about the young man. Argus also wanted clarification. This time there would be no excuse. The girls looked on with concern. He asked, "Where did the mysterious man come from? What is his purpose in coming to this country?" The white-haired youth calmly faced the two men as they waited for his answer. The air in the room suddenly grew stifling. All eyes turned to the silent warrior. Argus looked at him with a serious, steady gaze, waiting for the truth. The young man scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. "I didn't mean to hide it. I just thought no one would believe me, so I stayed silent." The knight smiled. "If it's your word, I'll believe it." The white-haired warrior smiled back. "Then you will believe what I say." With a serious expression, he revealed, "I am a human from 100 million years ago." Argus immediately recognized, "You're the one called the Taboo in Kodama village," realizing he was the person who had slept behind the unopenable door. The guild master admitted, "It's hard to believe right away." But Milia trusted the protagonist. She continued, "The professor went underground and opened the forbidden door." She described the ancient door made of metal, held shut by two enormous round locks. "My brother and the professors witnessed the professor's power with their own eyes." Argus looked at his sister in surprise at her revelation. The girl smiled and asked again, leaving her brother speechless. Jin explained, "I slept underground in this kingdom for a very long time. The reason I came to the capital is to gather information about this era." The guild master asked what kind of information he was looking for. He answered there were two things. First, about the corruptors, a threat he needed to understand better. He revealed, "These creatures have existed since 100 million years ago." Everyone was even more shocked. "But they shouldn't still be alive in this age." Argus asked why. He explained it was thanks to the spirits. 100 million years ago, the spirits spread across the world and maintained the balance. We saw a massive energy tower activated, releasing purifying power. Energy shot into the sky, spreading brilliant green-blue beams that covered the planet. From beyond the cosmos, the energy spread globally like a shower of light. Corruptors can only live in polluted places, filled with negative energy. But the spirits have the ability to cleanse the environment, making it impossible for them to survive. The guild master wondered, why are they still appearing in this age? He admitted he didn't know the details, but pulled something from his pocket. Holding the blue cube, he projected a hologram of his friend. The friend said, "The corruptor has evolved." The guild master exclaimed, "Is this technology from an ancient civilization?" He was curious about how the system operated, but Jin couldn't explain. The white-haired man said, "That's why I came to the royal capital. I want to know how people of this era deal with monsters and whether there are any written records." The guild master asked about the second part. He answered, "Clues about the laboratories." He's been searching for labs scattered around the world, while hiding the part about his power. In the end, he affirmed, "No matter what, I have only one goal." With determined eyes, he declared, "To wipe the corruptors from this world." After he finished explaining, the room fell silent. The guild master said, "The story is rather far-fetched." Argus agreed, but smiled, "I believe it because we all want to fight the monsters." The armored man advised him not to tell this story to others. Jin grinned confidently, "I know, people will think I'm crazy." Argus asked the guild master for his opinion. He replied, "If you believe it, then I believe it. Besides, someone with bad intentions wouldn't risk saving an entire castle." The atmosphere in the room immediately relaxed. The three seemed to have reached an agreement. Just then, the maid and the boy entered, apologizing for the interruption. The girl announced, "The time has come." The blonde Argus asked, "Is it time already?" He smiled and turned to the hero and the servant, "Prepare to go." The white-haired young man was a little flustered but agreed. Some time later, the carriage wheels spun fast. The carriage raced along the road toward the royal palace's magnificent castle. Inside the carriage, Jin looked out the window and thought, "I'm about to meet this country's royalty." He was wearing a neat suit. He wondered whether he should change clothes. Argus complimented, "The suit suits you well." The guild master nodded in agreement. The girls praised his appearance, but he found the clothes somewhat restrictive. Hardin explained, "The person you're about to meet is the first prince acting on behalf of the king." He said they needed to maintain appearances. Jin thought to himself that the whole affair was troublesome. The carriage neared the gate. He just hoped there wouldn't be any more trouble. Inside the castle, ranks of armored knights lined up to greet them. Many different races made up the royal guard, each one excellent. The group entered the throne hall. Artistes announced, "I've brought the nation's savior." From afar, an authoritative voice from the throne echoed, "Raise your heads." The three knelt to show their respect. The white-haired young man lifted his head and finally looked directly at the person on the throne, studying him closely. On the throne sat the first prince, Tails Kamoja, bearing an extremely dignified and confident posture. He introduced himself as Jin Shido. The prince only snorted lightly. The prince spoke on behalf of his ailing father, expressing the kingdom's gratitude for what he had done. He remarked, "I heard from Argus that you come from the small village of Kodama." With a sarcastic tone, he said in surprise, "I never expected someone so powerful to come from such a tiny place." With a dark smile, the prince said bluntly, "I will speak directly to you." Without beating around the bush, the prince ordered, "Become my loyal knight and obey me. Become a holy knight and dedicate yourself to the nation." The prince's command echoed through the splendid throne hall, and the atmosphere instantly grew oppressive and extremely uncomfortable. With blazing red eyes, he repeated the command with supreme arrogance. Jin was completely displeased with the proposal. A flash of anger crossed his eyes. The prince noticed the silence and asked, "Is there a problem? I haven't heard your answer." Hardin tried to intervene. reminding them that they were the ones who summoned the hero here. He advised the prince not to speak in a coercive manner. But Jin interrupted. "I have no intention of staying in this country long." The prince said he heard Jin was working at the academy. Jin confirmed it was only temporary. He asked bluntly, "Is that a refusal?" Jin replied, "Yes, and I apologize for that." In a grave tone, the prince said, "If that's the case, then there's no other way." The guards moved at once. Castle knights drew their swords, ready to attack at any moment. The prince ordered, "Seize that white-haired man." Hardin, horrified, tried to stop them but was restrained by the guards. The prince revealed, "This warrior is suspected of plotting to overthrow the state." The room gasped. He explained that a corruptor had been hidden behind the academy's ancient door. "Since they said you opened the door, it was only natural to suspect you." With a malicious smile, the prince hinted, "Perhaps the rescue of the nation was just a play." The guild master, furious, said, "This accusation is ridiculous and extreme." Jin remained silent, surrounded by a wall of weapons. The prince said, "If you agree to serve me, I'll drop the suspicion." With an evil grin, he repeated, "Since you refuse, there's no other choice." Argus thought to himself, he hasn't been in the city long. I'm the one who asked him to investigate the academy, and I warned you beforehand. He glanced at the female knight who was sneering and realized they had been deceived. They should have paid attention to strengthening security. The commander of the 3rd Division and other knights were fanatically loyal to the first prince. The commander of the 4th Division, the horned man, also belonged to the nobles' faction. The blonde knight understood clearly. From the start, the intention was to eliminate the hero if he refused. The prince said, "Letting someone who defeated a giant monster roam free is far too dangerous." But with a dramatic gesture he declared, "I am merciful, so I will give you one final chance." With crimson eyes he ordered, "Swear your loyalty to me at once." Jin remained silent as knights closed in on him with weapons pointed. With a serious expression, Jin said, "I don't understand this situation." The prince, confused, asked, "What do you mean?" The atmosphere grew even tenser. Jin explained, "A verbal oath means nothing in this situation." He continued, "If I only speak empty words and then run away, the oath is worthless." Argus agreed that was true. But Jin kept provoking. With a razor gaze he said, "It seems you want to force my words." He had been considering the true intent of the one on the throne. Do you simply want to satisfy a desire for control, or is there something else? The prince shouted in response, "Shut your mouth." An enraged knight asked, "Who do you think you're speaking to?" With a sneer, Jin told him to listen carefully and grab the spear's tip. With a swift motion, he channeled force into the weapon, shocking the soldier. The horned knight asked what was happening, not understanding his power. Before he could grasp what was happening, his massive body was hoisted into the air, and finally was flung aside by the protagonist without ceremony. The prince froze in horror, unable to believe what was unfolding. The blonde knight clasped his head in frustration at the chaos that had erupted. The commander of the 3rd Division, furious, tried to use soul magic against Jin. But the spell did not activate, and she ordered the other guards to seize him. Jin easily blocked the guard's spear strike, then kicked hard, sending the soldier flying with a horrendous crash. Jin remained composed, expending no apparent effort. Next, a powerful burst of force sent all the remaining knights sprawling away. The blonde prince went berserk and ordered an immediate attack on the insolent man. He even commanded Argus to join in beating the traitor. The armored young man drew his sword, while the guild master watched silently. But the wolf-eared youth hesitated, sweating cold as he faced his friend. The prince smiled savagely. "I don't care even if the target is killed." A host of soldiers rushed at Jin, determined to capture him at all costs. At that moment, the silver-haired man focused brilliant green magical energy throughout his body. Then the protagonist's body suddenly vanished, causing all attacks aimed at him to fail. But the protagonist's voice still echoed through the hall. Letting someone of that level of power roam free is dangerous. Yet if I truly wanted to, leveling this city would be extremely easy. But the reason I don't do that is because I stand with the people. I'm here to protect the lives of the people who live now. However, I do make exceptions. To those wicked enough to disregard human life, I will show no mercy. So which of the two are you, Clumosia? The prince froze in terror, realizing his life was in this man's hands. The captain pointed his sword at him in outrage, asking if he knew what he was doing. Jin confirmed, saying he was resisting a man who tried to force something utterly irrational. At that moment, the Horned Knight fell and asked if he intended to oppose the whole nation. The silver-haired young man denied it. Facing his enemies, he declared solemnly, "You are the ones doing that." The guild master listened tensely as Jin explained, "I will respect the true royal family. But I will only help if this nation's rules are fair and the demands made are reasonable." The commander listened closely as the protagonist warned, "I am not so cheap as to silently accept everything." The injured soldier heard him angrily say that if they tried to force him, they should not blame him for resisting. "First, I want to ask you one question." He leaned close to the prince's ear and asked, "Do you think things will always go your way?" The blonde prince began to sweat when that terrifying voice asked whether he was something more. At that moment, Jin's eyes flashed blue, exuding an extremely frightening magical power. However, the great doors of the hall suddenly opened, drawing the captain's and everyone's attention. Elegant footsteps echoed. A mysterious voice commented, "I've heard the whole story." With a gentle smile, a beautiful silver-haired girl entered and asked, "May I join the conversation?" The graceful girl walked into the throne hall, passing guards who remained completely still. Seeing the newcomer, the horned beastman was astonished and addressed Princess Charlotte with great respect. The blonde knight exhaled in relief, glad the girl had arrived in time to help. Argus thought to himself, "Now let the second princess finish this." Charlotte smiled kindly and teased her brother, "You seem to be enjoying yourself." The prince glared at his sister in anger and called her name with contempt. He was clearly extremely upset by the unexpected intervention. He looked toward Argus and realized what had happened. The princess scolded her brother, "You should have invited me to the meeting." With a mocking smile, she reminded him, "You're not even our father's official representative yet." The prince ground his teeth in rage at his sister's taunt. He retorted that, regrettably, the other was not a true hero. The prince accused him of being a criminal daring to oppose the royal family. The captain confirmed and said he had injured the knight commander. But the princess countered, "Wasn't it because he behaved rudely first?" The horned commander defended himself. "That silver-haired one intended to harm the first prince." The silver-haired princess asked, "Wasn't he merely standing behind your brother?" She smiled and turned to Jin, asking, "Isn't that so?" Jin agreed and explained he had only come closer to ask one question. The princess looked at her brother. "That's what the young man just said." She taunted, "Will you call someone a criminal over something this silly?" The prince trembled with rage, unable to respond to his sister's argument. The princess turned back to Jin and addressed him by his full name. With a graceful bow, she said, "I will not demand you serve this country as a slave. I ask you to help as a friend." Jin smiled at the offer. The silver-haired princess beamed happily and thanked him for agreeing. She suggested moving the conversation elsewhere, since this was not the appropriate place. With an authoritative gesture, she ordered the knights to escort her new friend. The captain and the soldiers complied, making way for Jin to pass. The prince watched everything with extreme, impotent fury. After a while, the carriage departed the castle. The blond youth said, "You scared me." He asked why the silver-haired man had acted that way. Jin replied, "Just a little." In truth, he had sensed a strange aura from the prince and hoped it was only his imagination. But deep down, he knew that malicious feeling was real and concerning. He then glanced at the princess again and thanked her for rescuing him. The princess smiled. "You don't need to thank me, you helped us earlier." She apologized for her brother, but Jin said it was unnecessary. With a smile, the girl reintroduced herself. "I'm Charlotte, the second princess." She asked Jin to continue helping as a friend, and he agreed. Argus wondered about the prince's attitude, but she didn't know the exact reason. She revealed that her brother was extremely ambitious and full of plans for the future. He intended to start a war to expand the territory as soon as he ascended the throne. Thus, Jin realized the prince saw him as a major obstacle to those plans. The princess promised she would not let relatives interfere in their lives any longer. She said Hardin had reported everything to their father, who lay ill in his chamber. She also revealed she had no intention of yielding the throne to her brother. With a serious, determined look, she asked Jin if he truly trusted her. The white-haired young man smiled and replied, "Yes." In the carriage, Argus asked where they were going and why the princess was accompanying them. She explained, it would be rude to summon the nation's savior without presenting a reward. She also remarked that he was staying at a modest inn. The group arrived. The princess looked excited about the upcoming surprise. With a radiant smile, she said, "We've prepared a special gift for the hero." Seeing the sight before him, Jin gaped in astonishment. The gift Princess Charlotte mentioned turned out to be an extremely large and magnificent mansion. She smiled and introduced it. "From now on, this house officially belongs to you. Feel free to use it as you wish." They all opened the doors and entered. A magnificent great hall unfolded before them, prompting Jin to exclaim, "This place is so lavish and splendid." He turned to Princess Charlotte with a skeptical look. "Can I really accept such a big gift?" His demeanor made Charlotte chuckle. "Of course. It originally belonged to a count, but it has been vacant for a long time." Hearing that, Jin curiously asked, "The count's? What if he returns to claim the house?" Upon saying it, he immediately saw Charlotte's extremely wicked smile and hastily stopped. "Never mind, I'm overthinking." Still, he was a bit uneasy. But suddenly gifting an entire mansion like this is a bit. Before he could finish, Argus the knight interjected, "This is simply to show how much we value your abilities. Just move in, no need to hesitate. Because this house is yours now." So the group began touring the mansion. After a while, Jin stroked his chin and nodded. "I understand. But it seems a bit too large for one person. Even the bedroom is so vast." Beside him, Argus laughed heartily. "If that's the case, I'll arrange additional servants to manage the place for you. After all, those people will surely be more than willing to serve you." The protagonist didn't agree right away but asked back, "Are you sure?" For this question, Argus replied cheerfully, "I owe you a great debt." "But if you don't mind, may I make one more request?" Jin, curious, asked. "What request?" Time passed quickly. The scene shifted to Squad 7's special training yard. There, the soldiers were energetically training together. Even Karina was sparring with a teammate. When the opponent lunged to attack, her gaze immediately focused. She thrust her wooden spear forward to block the blow, then heaved forcefully, sending the opponent's weapon flying into the air. Finally, she pointed the spear's tip straight at his face. He panicked and begged for mercy. "I yield." At that moment, applause broke out. A fresh green-haired girl smiled as she approached and praised. "You're improving fast, Karina." Karina replied indifferently, "I still have a long way to go." She reminded herself of the incident the day before. Back then, she only dealt with a few weak lackeys while the memory of Jin fighting the giant monster alone returned. That made Karina furious with herself. How could another being accomplish such a feat? Thinking this, she shouted in frustration, "Damn it, isn't the next opponent here yet?" At that moment, a team member ran over shouting, "Captain, Miss Charlotte has also arrived." Not far away, Argus and Princess Charlotte stood. Seeing everyone pause, Argus said with a smile, "Everyone continue training." Across the yard, as soon as Karina saw Jin's figure, her expression immediately darkened. She gritted her teeth, thinking irritably, "What the hell is he doing here?" Unaware of her thoughts, the third knight respectfully said, "This way, please, Princess Charlotte." After everyone sat down, Jin turned and asked, "So what do you want me to do?" Argus laughed. "You're here now, you should be able to guess, right?" Jin stood up, looked toward the knights training and asked to be sure, "You want me to instruct them?" The knight nodded. "Exactly. You must have witnessed the arrogant and contemptuous attitude of Prince Thales earlier. Both Prince Thales and Princess Charlotte are in a fierce struggle for the throne. We can't predict what underhanded tactics he might use. The only people who can loyally protect Princess Charlotte are our Squad 7. No one knows when danger will strike. Therefore, I want you to train them and prepare them for that day." Hearing this, Jin silently observed ahead, mentally nodding. Their current skills are already fairly decent. They have been training diligently every day. The sight of the soldiers training, until drenched in sweat, brought back old memories. Over 100 million years ago, he was like that too. To become an official agent of the nation, he had to train insanely hard. Back in the present, Knight Argus stepped forward and shouted, "Everyone gather here now. Today, to improve training quality, we've invited a national hero to serve as a special instructor. He will point out the shortcomings we need to fix. Is that clear to everyone?" The group answered in unison, "Yes, sir." Jin narrowed his eyes slightly, taking everything in. He thought to himself, teaching those who listen is easy, but dealing with the stubborn ones is a headache. He stepped forward and announced, "First, I want to test everyone's stamina. All of you run around the training ground perimeter for me." The first to object was Karina. "What? We do that exercise every day. There's no need for this redundant stamina test." She pointed at Jin angrily. "Did you come here just to make us do these trivial tasks?" Seeing this, those nearby rushed to restrain her. And Argus also wanted to speak up. However, Jin raised a hand to stop him. "I apologize for the earlier action. If so, let's change our approach a bit." Saying that, he removed his outer coat, walked to the weapon rack and said, "This sounds more interesting. Your weapon is a spear, right?" Karina, not fully understanding his intention, nodded. "Yes." Jin immediately picked up a spear, pointed it toward her and said, "Try to stab me once. No time limit. If you can touch me even once, the running exercise will be cancelled." No one wants to be instructed by someone weaker than themselves. Hearing Jin's bold declaration, Karina, intrigued, asked, "But do you even know how to use a spear?" "Don't worry," Jin said as he spun the spear with extreme skill, leaving Karina and everyone around astonished. He quickly caught the falling spear and confidently declared, "There's no weapon in this world I can't use."